Supervisor told me to stop reminding him about an overdue task. So I stopped, and he missed the deadline. I work as a project coordinator. Basically, I just keep track of what everyone's supposed to be doing and make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. My supervisor, James, is fine at pretending he's on top of stuff, but the dude forgets everything unless someone's reminding him. So I usually give him a heads up when things are due. Like last week I said, hey, just a reminder, that report's due Friday. He looks at me and goes, I don't need to be babysat. I know what's on my list. Alright then, you got it. So I keep my mouth shut. No reminders, no check-ins. I let him be the expert. Friday comes, nothing. Monday morning, he's suddenly in panic mode because the director is asking where the heck the report is. He turns to me like, why didn't you remind me? I just said, well, you told me not to. Now he thanks me every time I send a reminder. I guess we're back to babysitting, but at least he asked nicely. Okay, a few interesting things in this story. Now, I've never worked in like a big company before, so I don't really know that a project coordinator whose job literally is just to coordinate was much of a thing. But it does seem like a glorified babysitter, and I would say that seems unnecessary. But then clearly it's not, because you have people like this that aren't capable of keeping up with the work they have to do. I mean, I would have thought that was like a quite important part of your role. Not just obviously doing the work itself, but also knowing what work you need to do and when. But I suppose a project coordinator, obviously that does more than just babysit, does make sense. But him then saying after this, not, oh, okay, I need to be more diligent with my deadlines and knowing what I've got to do for when. But actually, okay, look, you remind me in future. Is that not a bit poor? I don't know. It's different for me. You guys let me know in the comments down below. But if I forget a deadline, that's on me. And like, I've only got myself to blame. I don't understand really, but fair enough. Good malicious compliance. That is what I will definitely say. I think the term babysitting here is confusing me. I think that's the thing, because like the idea of a project coordinator, I completely understand. But the idea of somebody going over to someone and saying, hey, just reminding you, you've got a deadline on Monday, I don't really understand, because I think you should be able to do that. But yes, not babysitting, project coordination, of course, that makes a lot of sense. I'd quite like it, to be fair, if somebody kept on top of everything that I needed to do. I do struggle with that sometimes. I also struggle with waffling. Let's carry on. Now for our third malicious compliance story. I should cancel on my end? No problem. I booked accommodation 2 months in advance for St. Patrick's weekend in Dublin. It was a fairly ancient B&B, but for €115, it was a place to sleep and the cheapest option for the busiest weekend of the year in Dublin. It was one double bed for me and a buddy to share. It was pay on arrival. Now, 3 weeks before the stay, the accommodation manager messaged me on the app I booked the stay on, telling me there's a problem. I can no longer stay, and to cancel on my side immediately. No apology, let alone help offered by them. This was followed by multiple phone calls daily, along with text messages in a harassing nature saying I need to cancel now so I can get my money back. Once again, it was pay on arrival. I didn't answer the calls or messages telling me to cancel. Something about it felt off, so I checked the listing for the night I was supposed to stay, and it just so happens the accommodation had been listed again for double the price. Likely, the manager realised St. Patrick's weekend was a cash grab. Maybe not immediately, but at the property manager's request, I simply rang booking.com and told them I'd like to cancel my booking. The customer service rep asked why I was cancelling. I explained in detail all the above to her, and things took an unexpected turn for the property manager. Ultimately, the rep agreed the property was acting in an unfair manner, and the solution was that booking.com would find me accommodation within 1 kilometre. Originally, they tried to get me to stay way outside of the city, but I wasn't having it, of where I intended to stay. The original property would then be liable to cover any difference in cost. Now here's the good part. Finding accommodation 3 weeks before St. Patrick's Day in Dublin is about as difficult as trying to light a fire with flint and steel in the rain. Near impossible. Everything within a 1 kilometre range was booked out, except for a well-known 4-star hotel. The room alone cost €350 per night and had 2 double beds, a much bigger room, and was in a much nicer location. The customer rep had to get it cleared by her team lead, so I just sat on hold doing chores for 25 minutes. Eventually, they came back and said it was all signed off on, and they'll send me a special link. What a treat. I gladly accepted their compromise. This in turn meant the property owner that tried to force me to cancel on my end was now indebted €235, and we got a massive upgrade for the same price we originally had. I had to pay the $350 up front, and I had to keep receipts and show proof of payment to the booking partner after our stay, but I got my refund of €235 the following week. Very interesting here, because the whole point is, if these people cancelled on you, I think then they would have to sort of, either pay a fine or deal with potentially your complaints. This thing, to be fair, has happened to me multiple times in the past with Airbnbs, hotels, etc., when these places don't realize that the prices should really be inflated for events that are happening in the city or whatever that these places are in. Then they realize after you've already booked and they just bump the price up and they cancel on you. I mean, that has happened to me before, so I don't really know how they get away with that. But this is much better, where they can't cancel on you. And the fact that they have the audacity to ask you to cancel on them is just ridiculous, because that's the only way they'll get around it and then be able to bump the prices up. But yeah, very, very poor technique. Shouldn't be allowed at all, especially this close to the trip. But yeah, overall, getting punished for bad practice like this is exactly what I want to see. And it's also amazing that you guys got a great upgrade for free. You want me to be on time? Okay, down to the minute. The timekeeping system at my job runs on a 15-minute increment schedule. Basically, if you clock in during the first 7 minutes of the increment, it rounds you backwards to the start of that segment. If you're in the last 7 minutes, it rounds you forward to the end of the segment. For example, you clock out at 4:52, congrats, the system says you left at 4:45. Now, if you clock in and out multiple times a day, like for lunch, that's 4 punches and potentially up to 28 minutes lost or gained, depending on where you land in those increments. So sorry, if you clock out at 4:53, in effect, you've clocked out 15 minutes later than if you'd clocked out in reality a minute before. That's the dumbest system ever. Anyway, shortly after I started, I began getting flooded with emails about being short a few minutes on my timesheet, and I was told I had to submit PTO, even though I worked full 8-hour days, sometimes more. It didn't matter that I was physically at work. If the system said I was short, I had to burn time off. So I started paying attention, really close attention. Here's the twist. My employer doesn't pay overtime in cash, but they do give you 1.5 times time off if you earn it. So 1 hour of overtime is 1.5 hours of PTO. With some strategic clocking in and out, always landing on the helpful side of the 15-minute window, I've gotten good at squeezing out those 28 minutes extra a day. That adds up to 140 minutes, 2 hours and 20 minutes of overtime a week, which when covered at 1.5 times becomes 3.5 hours of paid time off every week, all for doing exactly what they asked, watching the clock very closely. Thanks for the free time off. Wow. Well, I said it during reading there, and I have to say it again. This is the dumbest system ever. Is your technology not capable of just putting these things in by the minute or even by the second? Like every 15 minutes? That just doesn't make any sense. If it's like automated technology, that makes no sense. So I imagine what you were doing here was staying for an extra minute, as in signing out that extra minute later to make it seem as if you had been there for actually another 7 minutes on top of that. So for example, if you clock out at 4:53, then it would say that you clocked out at 5. So in effect, you are working for another 7 minutes there. And you're not really you're not doing anything wrong here, because you are saying you clocked out at 4:53, and that is when you did clock out. It just says that you left at 5. So yeah, you're gaining 28 minutes per day of work that you haven't actually done. So in effect, 140 minutes of overtime a week. So you're getting 3.5 hours of paid time off every week for just logging out like a minute later. That's so dumb. So over the course of a year, 3.5 hours times 52 for 52 weeks is 7.5 days. So just by punching out a minute later 4 times a day, you're gaining an extra 7.5 days of annual leave per year. That's absolutely insane. I mean, listen, you guys put in the comments down below how much annual leave you get, how much vacation you get. But in the UK, it's pretty normal to get what, like 25-ish days, roughly, maybe a little less, maybe a little bit more. So you're getting like 25% or 20% more annual leave just by using this silly technique. That's class. I wouldn't have made that Reddit post. I'm sorry. I just wouldn't have done, on the off chance that your boss sees that. You've got to keep that to yourself. That's an insane amount of time you're getting for free. Now for our 5th post. Take the chairs away from our work area. We're gonna F this place up. I work for a major US airline for a long time and at several different airports. There's an area behind the baggage counter where the bags get sorted for their respective flights after they've been checked. We're on our feet most of the time, but we each have chairs at our workstations so we can sit and rest for a minute when there's a lull in bags coming down. Every few years, there'll be a hot trash new manager who's going to turn this airport around and make it the best performing one in the system, and they all seem to have the same idea. Take away the chairs so the agents are always standing at the belt. Now, the agents in this area are generally on the senior side as it's indoors and out of the elements. We've done the job for a while. We know how to do the job efficiently, and we really do our best to avoid F-ups. But as long as human error is a factor, there will always be some. Taking our chairs does nothing but annoy us. Their BS excuse usually is framing it as a safety issue, a tripping hazard. So that's where we start. Smaller or oddly shaped bags get sent down in a plastic tub so they don't jam the belt. Maybe you've seen them. We take them off the belt and stack them up on the ground for someone to come by and collect. But not anymore. We let them pile up on the belt, making it a giant pain in the butt for the poor idiot collecting them. They're then complaining constantly to the manager. We say, sorry boss, they're a tripping hazard on the ground. Next, we start following the rules. Our employee handbook lays out very clearly what the company's expectations for us are in our job duties. We're only expected to pull 1 bag per minute and take bags out no later than 20 minutes before the flight departs. Maybe you've guessed already, but those expectations are nowhere near good enough to actually complete these tasks. So by the company's own rules, we were all going well beyond what was expected of us. So we start giving them the bare minimum, 1 bag per minute, 20 minutes prior. My manager was annoyed. He and the supervisors were throwing bags, and us being unionized, we documented and grieved every single time it happened. And the company a few days later had to pay out several thousand to agents for covered work. Delays across the board. 1,500 bags missed that day. The next morning, the chairs were back in their spots, and we continued as normal. And afterwards, nobody would give that manager the time of day. A lot of passengers got screwed over that day, but we were working exactly to the rules our company had given us, so you can blame the airline and not the agents. The handbook was changed after a while, but only extending it to 35 minutes prior instead of 20. It's still 1 bag per minute the last time I looked. I was lucky enough to be a part of 3 of these events over the years, but this was the most satisfying. Now, this is one of those stories that I've seen a lot of times before, not necessarily just on malicious compliance. In fact, across the whole of Reddit for all the years I've been doing this, where be it entitled people or just people who are in some sort of position of power or something like this, they'll do one thing which really isn't necessary at all to potentially, in a non-human world, if you're just looking at like pure efficiency and numbers, may increase some metric by 0.01%, but in reality it's just going to annoy people that are working for you, and that is going to have massive ramifications, as you've seen. It's like these people are clearly working so hard anyway, and they're very good at their jobs, and they know what they're doing. Why anger them for a potential tiny marginal gain? Also, surely you know that they are producing at a level that actually isn't asked of them, and they're going above and beyond what they've actually been set out to do in your rules, in your handbook. Like, it's ridiculous. I don't understand why managers, bosses, whatever, people don't go, okay, yeah, perhaps we could squeeze out a tiny little bit more of X by introducing this. But the human side, no. What's the point, first of all? And secondly, people are just going to get annoyed. I don't get it, but yeah, well done to you guys for sticking to the rules. Now for our final malicious compliance post of this episode. You want to review every client interaction? Perfect. Your inbox is about to blow up. I've been working at this small marketing agency for just over a year now. It's my first real job after college, and I've been thrilled to have actual clients and responsibilities. Well, I was thrilled until we got a new account manager, Debbie. Debbie came from one of those corporate mega agencies where apparently they micromanage the living daylights out of everyone. From day one, she had concerns about my communication style with clients. Mind you, I'd been praised by these same clients for being responsive and helpful. Last month, after I sent what I thought was a perfectly normal email to our biggest client about a small scheduling change, Debbie called an emergency meeting. From now on, I need to approve all client communications before they go out, she announced with that fake smile managers use when they're being unreasonable but pretending they're helping you. Everything. Emails, phone call notes, text messages, meeting agendas, send them to me first for review. When I pointed out that this would slow down our response times, she just waved her hand dismissively. It's about quality control. Better to be right than fast. Fine. You want all communications? You got it. I started that very afternoon. Every single thing. If a client asked what time a call was scheduled, I drafted an email response and sent it to Debbie, awaiting your approval on this time confirmation. If a client texted asking for a quick file, I'd screenshot it and email Debbie. Please approve my response to this text message. I even created a special folder in my drafts called Awaiting Debbie's Approval, and I set up an automated counter. By the end of day one, I sent her 17 approval requests, and by the end of week one, it was over 100. The best part, I stopped answering my phone when clients called. Instead, I'd let it go to voicemail. Then email Debbie. Client X called about Y. My proposed response is attached. Please approve. After about 2 weeks, Debbie was drowning. She'd fallen behind on approving my communications, which meant that clients weren't getting responses. They started escalating to her directly, which doubled her workload. The breaking point came when our biggest client emailed both of us complaining about delays. I responded to the client with, I've forwarded your concerns to Debbie for approval of my response. Once approved, I'll get back to you promptly. The next morning, Debbie stopped by my desk, looking exhausted. I think we need to adjust our approval process, she said, trying to maintain her corporate dignity. Moving forward, just use your judgment for routine communications. Only send me things that involve project scope, timeline changes, or budget discussions. Are you sure? I asked innocently. I have about 30 draft responses waiting for your review right now. She visibly cringed. That won't be necessary anymore. I've been happily sending emails without approval for 2 weeks now. Debbie barely makes eye contact in the hallway, and honestly, that's fine by me. The best part, my quarterly review is coming up, and all those approval emails are documented proof that I've been trying my absolute best to follow company protocol. Sometimes, malicious compliance is the best teacher. Now this is just micromanaging to the nth degree, and it's completely unnecessary. And yeah, Debbie's had her reward there for being pedantic and trying to get into the minutiae and sort of overmanage, control all her employees and make sure everything's 100% correct. Now this is something that I don't fully know with what I do. I've just got Steve-O who works alongside me on this channel. But I know from hearing other people that letting other people do their jobs is the best thing you can do. Hiring people that are good at their jobs and then just saying, you know what, I trust you to do the job. I hired you for a reason. I'll leave you to it, and letting them get on with it is the most efficient way of doing things. Like trying to micromanage not only stretches you massively, as you can see here. Debbie can't have been able to even do her own job well at all because of all this stuff, but also just annoys all your employees who you are micromanaging. So no point, but hopefully Debbie has learned her lesson now. I kind of doubt it, but you never know. Maybe she has. Boss accused me of bullying, so I requested punishment. Years ago, I worked in a semi-public sector job as part of a successful team helping make life easy for local businesses. Our team boss took a good job in the private sector, and a new boss was recruited from a decent organisation similar to ours in a different part of the country. She worked compressed hours, Monday to Thursday, and was off on Fridays. A month or two in, and although the new boss was quite particular about things being done her way and had upset a couple of my colleagues by criticizing their work, I'd had no problems with her. We had a team meeting where the boss said that our performance wasn't good enough. We were arguably the best in the country though, and that she wanted to be more involved in what and how we did everything to ensure better quality, and so we should copy her into every client email so that she could comment as needed before we sent another reply. Although this seemed inefficient, nobody argued, and I just asked her if I should wait until Monday for her to comment on any client emails received on a Friday. I can't remember exactly what she said, but at the end of the meeting, she asked me to stay behind, and then told me in a heated tone that my question was, quote, bullying behavior, that it was unprofessional to ask that question in front of the team, and said that my actions were the sort of thing that HR would see as grounds for dismissal and that I should be very careful in future. Talk about an overreaction. I told her I understood, and we returned to our desks, where I wrote up every single detail of the entire meeting and interaction and sent it to the head of HR, with the explanation that as bullying was very serious and may not be reported by the victim, I felt duty bound to report myself. I also laid it on pretty thick about being appalled by my unprofessional behaviour and the fact that my career was likely at risk, and I clearly had a desperate need for training and discipline to fix my dangerous ways. I also copied in my union rep. That is so good. Within a day, me, my union rep, and my boss were with the head of HR, who, being a by-the-book professional, could find no indication of bullying or justification for my fears of being an unprofessional bully in need of re-education. I was actually asked to leave the meeting. My union rep stayed in, and I don't know what was said, but within 6 weeks, my boss was gone. And that same week, my weak and ineffective but likeable big boss called me in to thank me, as he'd wanted to get rid of her but hadn't known how. Unreal. Okay, this is actually brilliant. I got a little bit worried when OP said that you understood after your boss came over and said those ridiculous things to you after that meeting, but then very quickly I understood why you said that. Someone's commented, I love it when they hand me their rope, and yeah, that is kind of the thing, and it makes me think about something that I hear quite a lot, especially with employing people. You've got to be very careful who you employ, because once you've employed somebody, it can be extremely hard to get rid of them. And clearly that is what your big boss was referencing, saying thank you to you for giving him an opportunity to get rid of her. All modifications must be restored to the original. My family and I moved into a house in 2008. 5 bedrooms, 3,200 square feet, $1,600 a month. It was a decent price in 2008, and the rent stayed the same for many years. Since I'm reasonably handy, I would fix things myself rather than bother an old man. I lived there so long that I also made quite a few upgrades. In 2024, the owner passed away and his son inherited the property. A week later, he gave notice of intent to inspect the property. During that inspection, he kept trying to open drawers and look through my belongings, which isn't legally allowed, and was rude when I stopped him. As he left, he handed me a notice that my rent was increasing to $4,000 monthly, about $1,000 over market value. I would have paid higher rent if it had been reasonable, but I wasn't paying that much. My month-to-month lease was worded to require 3 months' notice to raise the rent. I pointed out this fact, then gave him notice that I'd be moving out at the end of those 3 months. A few days later, I was served with an eviction notice. The month-to-month lease also required 3 months' notice to evict me without cause, so he tried evicting me with cause. He claimed that I'd made unauthorized modifications to the house and cited the back door with a dog door installed. I still had the original door in the garage and the previous owner's permission, so it was neither unauthorized nor a modification. Regardless, the judge decided I needed to move out within 30 days or he would grant the eviction. Additionally, he explicitly ordered that all modifications be restored to the original. This is where the malicious compliance comes in, and I'm sure you already saw this coming. All the smart house additions I made were removed. The tool shed in the yard was removed. The pond was filled in. Closet organizers were torn out. Garage organizers were removed. The updated appliances were replaced with basic models. Every update I made was removed, and then I moved out. He sued me for removing everything. His lawyer cited a law that says any changes to the property become part of the property, and it's illegal to remove them when vacating the property. However, my lawyer pointed out the order from the previous judge, stating, quote, all modifications must be restored to the original. I provided receipts for all the things I had removed, proving that I had added them and was required to remove them. I won the case, and he had to pay my legal fees. A few months later, I got a call from his sister. Some of my mail had not been forwarded, and she wanted to ensure I got it. We had a short conversation about the entire ordeal. She told me the house was actually inherited by 4 siblings. Her brother had lied to everyone. First, he'd raised the rent, knowing I would move out. He already had a deal to sell the house to one of those big rental companies. He told his siblings the house had negative equity and nobody would get anything from the sale. In reality, the house was paid off and worth about $700,000. They'd made an offer on the house, which included all the stuff I later removed. He couldn't afford to replace everything, so they took him to court over the sale. Since all 4 siblings were listed as owners, all were named in the lawsuit, which is how they learned the truth. In the end, the house sold for $550,000. In exchange for not pressing fraud charges against him, his 3 siblings split the proceeds, and he got nothing. Okay, there we go. Phenomenal story. First of all, before I give my thoughts on it, OP has answered some common questions from Reddit. Starting with this. How did everything happen so fast after the landlord died? OP says, I guess my wording wasn't clear. I don't actually know when he died. I only talk to the guy once or twice a year. This all started about a week after I was notified of his death in February of 2024. I moved out in early June. We went to court over the removals in September, and I spoke with his sister in December. Everything I posted happened over the span of nearly a year. Next question. Why did OP rent for 17 years instead of buying a house? Well, I moved into the house during my divorce in 2008. Buying a house during a divorce isn't easy. I chose this house because it was large enough for me and 3 kids and close to their schools. By the time they moved out, I was set in my ways. I planned to buy another place at some point, but I was in no rush. Next question, this is interesting. How did his siblings not know what he was up to? I don't know. Everything involving me was my first-hand experience. Everything that happened after that was second-hand information I got from his sister. I can't confirm what she told me, I can only share what she said. Next question. Why did I do so many upgrades on a rental? I wasn't tearing out walls or replacing floors. Everything I did was reversible and done to make my life easier. Also, the landlord was retired, never raised the rent, and always gave permission. Even though I was renting, it was my home. Next question. Why did the judge only give me 30 days to move out? Well, the eviction process didn't happen overnight. I thought this was obvious, but some people seemed confused. From the point that I gave him 3 months notice to seeing a judge, nearly 2 months had passed. There's a time process that has to be followed. Interesting question now. How did I remove everything so quickly? Well, actually, none of the stuff was that difficult to remove. The pond wasn't a small lake. It was a small 300-gallon hole in the backyard with a few goldfish and plants. It took us about 3 hours to drain and fill it in. The shed was sold to someone who took it away on a flatbed. Organizers were modular. Appliances are similar to replace. The most time-consuming was replacing all the smart plugs with standard outlets and smart bulbs with regular bulbs. How are we supposed to believe that you had all those receipts? Yeah, that is a fair question, because I suppose, as you said, it's very important that you did have the receipts, but for all those years you kept all the receipts? I suppose you must be very organized. Well, I've been self-employed for 29 years. I keep every receipt because Uncle Sam doesn't mess around when it comes time for an audit. Most receipts come to my email, but I also have a portable receipt scanner for everything else. That's very organized, I've got to say. I mean, I'm self-employed. I've not kept all my receipts. Yes, I have the emailed ones, I suppose, if I was really forced to find them, but according to my dad, I should be more organized. But anyway, last question. How would anyone believe the house had negative equity? Well, again, I can't speak for them, but I can share a personal anecdote. My mum died in 2022. While settling her estate, we discovered that she had a reverse mortgage. Essentially, a company loaned her money with no mortgage payments. In return, they had to be paid back if she died or tried to sell the house. The house wasn't worth enough to pay them off, so we let them take it. Reverse mortgages are prevalent and often predatory. I don't know if he told them this, but it's not far-fetched to believe a house has negative equity. Exactly, yeah, it doesn't even have to be that specific thing, but houses with negative equity, that can't be that uncommon. And I suppose if your brother was the one that said, you know what, look, don't worry about this, I'll take care of it and I'll let you know what's going on with it, you probably would just trust what he said about it. Well, maybe not after hearing that he was lying the whole time. Okay, there we go. That clears a few things up, but brilliant start to the episode. I suppose the only real gripe I have with the conclusion of this one is that the brother didn't get any jail time. I mean, that would have been the icing on the cake, but at least he's not getting any of that money. And by the way, that's a lot of money. What is that? 550K. He would have got, well, all of it, I suppose, if he had his way, or 700,000 of it. In the end, all his siblings are getting, what, 170K roughly? Is that about right? 180K? 183K? Is that right? Yes. 183, 333. And he's getting none. So he's $183,000 down for being a fraud. Good stuff. And well done to you, OP, as well, for dealing with this. Because, yeah, it sounds tough. And that 30 days to move out eviction note that you had to sort of go by and stand by because of the judge giving you that, I mean, that is awful. So I hope you're all right, but well done to you. Now for our next malicious compliance story. You think I'm fudging my hours? You're right. Here's my real hours. I started working for a non-profit in 2019 after being a volunteer member since 2000. It was supposed to be temporary for 3 months or so, but the non-profit dragged their feet hiring a permanent replacement. I'm fairly well off. Not filthy rich, but debt-free and comfortable, and didn't need the money. So I never billed for my hours after working 15 months full-time. It was supposed to be $25 per hour, Canadian currency, but I was willing to work for free if they just found a replacement in a reasonable time. They were pressuring me for an invoice, so I finally invoiced them for 40 hours a week for 15 months, and it was about a high $60,000. They were livid for a variety of reasons that I didn't understand. They accused me of lying about my hours because I was a new father and my wife had gone back to work after maternity leave, and there's no way that I could have worked that much. When I told them I had my son in daycare instead of staying at home with him, they sarcastically said, "Now you know what it's like to work an actual job like the rest of us." They were mad that I wasn't volunteering my time anymore like I used to, but I insisted I was, and that my build time was only for the TV bingo fundraiser and not for any other non-profit activities. They didn't believe me. I tried to tell them my hours were actually more than I billed for, and my hourly rate is greatly reduced compared to what I normally charge for all the work I was doing. IT, e-commerce, web design, marketing, HR operations, bookkeeping, TV production, etc. But they said they didn't care about the rate reduction. They insisted that I charge my normal rates for my actual hours and then deduct 10 hours a week for volunteering, which is about 10 times more hours than any of them volunteer for. Okay, bet. So I started charging them $40 to $125 per hour depending on the task. I recorded all my tasks and hours in great detail. I charged for any time I spent doing what was normally volunteer work for the non-profit. Then I finally deducted 10 hours a week. I was billing an average of 50 hours a week after the volunteer hours were deducted. I also took the opportunity to start hiring more people under me on their dime so I could work way less than I did in the first 15 months, but still get paid the same, if not more. They couldn't say anything because it was exactly what they asked for. I was billing $1,000 per week before malicious compliance, and then about $3,000 after, which I started trimming back down closer to $1,000 a week after cutting my own hours. These guys kept doubling down and accusing me of incompetence and fraud over the next year and a half that I continued working, but I didn't care anymore. They turned my passion into a terrible job that I didn't need, so I stayed until all my amazing employees were hopefully set up for success, and then I wrote that non-profit out of my life for good. I didn't feel any guilt over being paid for my time with them because I had raised more money for them in 30 months, $30 million gross, about 20 million net, than they had raised in 100 years before then. Wow, sounds like you were very good at your job. Sorry, you're volunteering. I think it's very telling when somebody is working at a place, volunteering, whatever, but they're clearly not that concerned with money or hours, etc. That, like, they're not in this for the money. I mean, they were a volunteer before, then they sort of got a temporary job. Like, I think it's probably best to sort of let them be, especially when they're doing so well like they are. Also, I mean, just something that immediately springs to my mind is if somebody is making a non-profit that much money, then the non-profit should probably be paying them a good amount anyway, even if it isn't like, you know, it's a charity, you're not going to be getting millions and millions, but surely it's like not worth being pedantic about this sort of thing. It's just confusing, right? So they started by pressuring you for an invoice, OP, despite the fact that you didn't really care that much. Then once you gave them that invoice, they were like, no, you're lying. It's just strange. Like, what were they actually trying to achieve? Maybe they were told that, no, come on, full-time employee, we have to pay you, whatever. But it just got a bit weird. I don't understand it. OP's actually said in the comments down below, the non-profit world is especially entitled. Interesting. It can get rather toxic. I mean, how? I mean, look, it's a shame. Like, you are giving them so much value. Like, my mum works for a charity and she is trying to work out how to get more money in. Like, fundraising is extremely hard, especially in this day and age. But for you to be doing that much and them still to be being like, oh, you're overcharging us in terms of your hours, or you're lying about hours, etc. It's weird. Like, you're so good at your job, clearly. I don't know why these people are sucking the fun out of something that you're so good at and, well, at least used to really enjoy. Now for our next post. I brought the company to a standstill to make a point. I worked in the engineering department of a smaller manufacturing company, around 70 to 80 employees. My responsibility, among other things, was to handle any design changes, edit part and assembly drawings, bills of materials, etc. Previously, this was all handled by putting together a packet of actual paper documents that had to be shuffled from engineering to manufacturing. Sometimes ping-ponging back and forth if we were doing something complicated that required input from various people within those departments. Eventually, the company started to implement a software-driven procedure that was supposed to eliminate the stacks of paper that would sometimes get lost on someone's desk. The problem was that our bare-bones staff didn't really have time to learn all of the ins and outs of the software and refine the process to be truly efficient. Basically, it was left so that if an item was entered into an engineering change order, it was locked down so that no one could build one, but also a customer couldn't even order one, or any machine that this item happened to be a component of until the change process was completed. And sometimes this could take weeks. I tried explaining several times that if we ever had to work on some item that is used in several of our products, this would bring everything to a screeching halt. My manager at the time understood this, but could never get all of the people who needed to work on the software procedure to sit down and finalize everything. One day, I was tasked with changing the design of a hardware component that was used in every machine we built. I told my manager that as soon as I started the process, no one in sales would be able to enter an order for any customers until the process would be completed. He shrugged and said, "Do it," knowing that I was right. Within 30 minutes of getting started, a salesman came to my desk asking why he couldn't enter an order. I explained what was happening. He left, and soon after, the VP of the company was at my desk asking what needed to be done. So I told him he needed to corral everyone needed to hash out how the software was supposed to work properly, instead of the half-assed just lock everything down deal they left off with. He immediately called in whoever was on that list. It took a few days, as I recall, and the component in question was expedited to be approved within the week. To this day, I use this story in interviews whenever I'm asked one of those questions like, give me an instance where you had to solve a major problem in the workplace. I mean, that is the definition of a major problem in the workplace that you solve, so pretty good story to use. I reckon your manager during this whole ordeal was also on the malicious compliance train. Like, when he shrugged and said, "Do it," knowing that you were in the right, that just shows he knows that you know what's going on, and you're both sort of like, yeah, this is a terrible idea, but we're getting told to do it by a higher up, so let's just do it, and then we'll maybe get the I told you so moment in the aftermath. It feels like one of those stupid things where if somebody had just listened, this would never have happened. This obviously was always going to be a bad idea anyway. I mean, how can you not take orders on every single little product that a particular piece or whatever is involving when you have to change it in a certain way or whatever? Like, it's just ridiculous. Interestingly, OP's actually said in the comments down below that his manager here was one of the few he really liked. He stuck up for his guys, but it was always like jousting windmills for him with upper management. There you go. Upper management's the problem here. It's not the talented people like you that know what they're doing. Now for our next story. If your pay raise isn't enough, quit. Okay then, I got a job as a security guard after leaving the army because I wasn't qualified to do much else, and I hadn't decided if I was going to college yet or not. The company refused to pay very much, so they had high turnover. Because of that turnover, they had small raises built in at 90 days, 6 months, and a year as an incentive to stay on. By the way, this took place around 1992. I needed a job, and until I had my trash together, this would do. So I showed up and I worked. My 1-year anniversary rolls around, and I don't see my 50 cents an hour raise in my paycheck, but something more like 35 cents. So I called the boss. My 3 and 6 month raises had been delivered with no issues, so I was surprised my 1-year anniversary hadn't shown up. Supposedly, they wanted to give all employees a raise, so they did. And yes, I got a small raise, along with all the other guards, a few hundred of us. It was something like 35 cents an hour for each of us. Okay, fine, but what about my promised 50 cents an hour? As far as I was concerned, this 35 cents an hour was something you initiated after promising me more, so this is bonus. When I called the manager, I was told I wasn't going to get a raise for my 1-year raise because you just got a raise. No one gets 2 raises at once. If your pay raise isn't enough, then quit. In other words, they were trying to claim a 35 cent an hour raise for every employee somehow was overriding the fact that I was owed an additional 50 cents an hour longevity raise. I'm sure there were others caught up like that. Fine, they want to give me 35 cents an hour of a raise and tell me that that's equal to the 85 cents an hour. I'll find something better. I spent the next week calling in sick and showing up late while job hunting. I called the office at the end of my last day and I told them I was done and they could find someone else, giving them no notice at all. Panic mode ensued. Everyone else was at 40 hours for the week and they hated paying overtime. One of the salaried managers had to cover for me. They told me to quit, so I did. I'm a teacher now, near retirement. My raises are still trash, but at least I can barely live off of it, and I have a trashy union for now, which is more than I had then. A few more cents an hour, and they could have kept me as a wage slave. Crazy that I'd even consider it now, looking back on it. At least I enjoy my job today, as crazy as the kids are. I've seen this type of story time and time again. Surely, and I've said this so many times now, surely it is worth just paying your employees a tiny bit more money. Like 50 cents per hour more. It's not that much in the grand scheme of things, is it really? I'm not going to do the maths, because I don't need to. It really isn't that much. A few dollars extra a day to then not have to go through the entire process of losing somebody that clearly is good at their job, like you've kept it for a year and there's no sign of them saying, oh, you're not doing it well, to find somebody else in an industry and in your company where there's so much turnover. How is that worth it? Like, surely just like the people that are good at their job, pay them a bit more. That's sort of what promotions are, I suppose. Give them more responsibility, keep them on, like show them that they are worth it to your company. But no, if you're doing this sort of stuff, I'm sorry, you don't deserve to keep people like OB. Now for our next malicious compliance. Use all your PTO before December 31st or lose it. All right, don't mind if I do, even if the project burns. This happened a couple of years ago at my old job. A pretty demanding corporate gig where we were always juggling tight deadlines, constant emails, and way too many meetings that could have been Slack messages. Around early November, HR sent out one of those all-staff emails. Sorry, I have to interrupt myself there. There's actually nothing I hate more than meetings that could have just been a message. It's so annoying, or just even an email. Like the amount of times that I respond to an email where someone has said, can we just jump on a quick call? And I'm like, yeah, we can do, but you could also just email me a few points, like, a couple of paragraphs very quickly, and I can look at them in my own time and respond, and then neither of us have to schedule. If you work in a job like that, guys, where there are too many meetings, where you think, what is the point of this? You could have just literally sent a notification in Slack or something. Comment down below. Does it annoy you? Or do you quite like the meetings? I probably know the answer. Anyway, let's carry on. Around early November, HR sent out one of those all-staff emails with a bright red banner and urgent tone. It read something like this: Reminder, all unused PTO must be taken before December 31st. We will not be allowing rollovers this year. Please schedule your remaining days immediately or risk losing them. No exceptions, no flexibility, no consideration for project timelines. Now, I wasn't one to take a ton of time off during the year, mostly because every time I tried, something urgent would come up and I'd get guilted into postponing. So by November, I had 10 full days of paid time off just sitting there. And according to HR's big red warning, I had about 6 weeks to use them. Naturally, I did what any burnt out, underappreciated employee would do. I opened the calendar and I booked myself off from December 18th to December 31st. 2 full weeks right before the new year, smack in the middle of the most chaotic time in our project cycle. A week later, my manager, let's call him Rob, came to me in a mild panic. Hey, I saw your PTO request. I was hoping we could shift that a little. December's going to be a critical time for the project and we really need all hands on deck. Yeah, I get that, but HR sent that PTO deadline. If I don't use those days, I lose them. And I've already worked through enough vacations this year. He looked uncomfortable, but couldn't argue with the logic. I even forwarded him the HR email with the subject line, using my days as required, smiley face. He escalated it to HR, of course. And what was HR's reply? Well, we understand it may be inconvenient, but our PTO policy is final. Managers are responsible for planning around employee availability. That reply felt like Christmas came early. So I prepped my team as best I could, left detailed notes, and on December 18th, I logged out, stress-free. While they were scrambling to hit deadlines, dealing with last-minute client requests, and working late, I was sipping hot chocolate, watching Netflix, and actually enjoying my holiday season for once. When I came back in January, the project had been delivered, but barely. The team was exhausted, mistakes had been made, and the post-mortem meeting was basically 45 minutes of finger-pointing. But no one dared say a word to me. After all, I was just following HR's rules. Moral of the story, if a company insists you follow policy to the letter, don't feel bad when you do, even if it means watching the ship catch fire from your cozy vacation cabin. Again, with this story, I'm just left confused. Like, why do companies follow policy to the letter, as OP has just said, when it's just the wrong thing to do? I feel like this is probably a thing in bigger companies, and the bigger the company gets, the more this sort of thing probably happens, where people just start to lose their common sense and they're sort of just jumping through loopholes because they have departments that aren't really in contact with each other and there are specific rules throughout the company, etc., etc. And it's almost sort of like formulaic in a way in which these things happen, rather than somebody actually thinking to themselves, is this sensible? No, so let's not do it. Whereas when you have like a smaller company and people are more sort of aligned, to use a buzzword, and actually aligned as in like they're working close together and they're thinking, okay, well, we've got this big project at this moment. Let's not take holiday before it. Let's take it afterwards. And who cares about the fact that, yeah, maybe I'll take 40 days of holiday one year and then 20 the next, because actually it makes sense. This sort of stuff doesn't happen. And ultimately the client's happier. Strange though. I don't know why you would ever give a deadline of you have to take PTO before this period either. Like, this is often a period where things need to sort of get done before the end of the year. Then everyone takes their vacation from like the 23rd or even the 24th, later than that. Not like the 18th when you need these sort of things to be wrapped up before Christmas. Now for our penultimate malicious compliance. Smokers get more breaks? Well, hold my beer then. This goes back about 10 years ago. I worked for a large telecommunications company as a call center supervisor. Most of my peers were smokers, and with the way schedules were set up, there were large chunks of the day where only 2 or 3 of us were on at the same time. Our manager insisted one of us always be visible on the call center floor while also performing our regular duties, performance reviews, call monitoring, escalations, and weekly one-on-ones with our team. I also had the largest team with consistently over 20 reporting to me. All this to set the stage. I noticed that I seemed to be the only supervisor actually doing my time being visible. But every time I tried to carve out an hour or two for the rest of my job, they were always out smoking. It got to the point that I was working after hours just to stay caught up. I brought it up to my manager, thinking she would discreetly monitor it. She didn't. Instead, in a supervisor meeting, she announced to the entire group that she knows we have a busy job and sometimes it seems imbalanced, understatement, but that really the smokers were just taking their lunch hour in short smoke break intervals instead, so it all worked out in the end. Cool. The next day, I came to work with a pack of cigarettes in my bag ready to go. The second I saw one of my peers going out to smoke, I went out with them, timing the breaks, lit cigarette in my hand the entire time. It was a revolving door. They were going out to smoke almost more than once an hour and usually out there for a solid 20 minutes each time. By the end of the first day doing this, I had timed one supervisor at nearly 2 hours worth of smoking breaks. I well exceeded my own lunch hour. So I started doing it every day. I packed small snacks to munch while outside instead of taking my entire lunch. One day, my manager saw me heading out and seemed surprised. I just shrugged and said, yeah, I've decided to stop smoking. She couldn't say anything because if she timed mine, she would have to time theirs as well. That's so good. Imagine that, just being like, you know what, it's kind of getting a bit annoying that the smokers in our group, my colleague, are getting that much free time outside. I'm just going to start smoking myself. This went on for roughly a month before she announces to our management team that we would be required to start coordinating breaks among the team to make sure we had coverage. I gained not only the well-earned smugness from ruining things for all my lazy peers, but also a bit of relief from constantly floor walking. I mean, there we go. Ultimately, you have, in a way, I know it's a joke, but committed to a very unhealthy habit to get more time off. And you could argue that on the one hand, yeah, you're smoking now. I know you're not, but say you actually were like, you know what, I'm actually going to become a smoker, so I get more time off. You're smoking, but you're also working less. I don't know. Is it worth it? No, but genuinely, it is one of those things where non-smokers get punished for being healthier. How is that right? I don't really know. Now, this is controversial. Arguably, smoking breaks shouldn't be a thing at all. Now, that is controversial, and that seems pretty kind of right wing, but I don't know, do you, if you're a gambling addict, get gambling breaks? Or if you're an alcoholic, get alcohol breaks? No, there's my point. Somebody said in the comments, I believe there are companies in Japan that give their non-smoking employees a couple of extra days off throughout the year to make up for the difference in time that smokers end up having from their smoke breaks. That is fair, and that's obviously what should happen. I'm not saying in a practical sense that smoking or smoke breaks shouldn't exist, but you shouldn't get punished for not taking those breaks, is the point. And ultimately, you are working more hours if you're not taking consistent smoke breaks. That's just a fact, and those people need to be compensated. And now for our final malicious compliance post of this episode. You want me to stop logging bugs? Okay, but don't say I didn't warn you. This happened a couple of years ago when I was working as a QA analyst for a mid-sized software development company. I thought that some of you might enjoy it. I was part of a Scrum team working on a new feature for a large enterprise client. Our team was made up of the usual suspects: devs, a Scrum master, a product owner, and myself as the sole QA. Now, I'm a pretty thorough tester. I take pride in not just finding bugs, but documenting them clearly with steps to reproduce, screenshots, logs, you name it. Some devs loved me for it, others not so much. One dev in particular, Mike, really hated having bugs logged against his code. He had this passive-aggressive attitude where any issue I found was user error or not a bug. The guy had a serious ego problem and believed his code was flawless. We were getting close to a deadline and I was logging a lot of issues. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to warrant attention. Some were cosmetic, others were functional, but all were valid. Mike didn't like that I was slowing things down. During a sprint planning meeting, Mike went on a mini rant about how the QA was bogging the team down with unnecessary bugs and how we shouldn't waste time logging minor issues that don't block functionality. Surprisingly, the product owner, who was also feeling the deadline pressure, sided with him. The decision was made. From now on, only log critical/blocker issues. Everything else can be reported informally or ignored. I clarified. So, You want me to stop logging non-blocking bugs, even if they're reproducible? Yep, exactly. Let's focus on shipping. Okay, you got it, boss. For the next 2 sprints, I only logged blockers, like the app crashes or data corruption level stuff. Everything else, I kept to myself. No documentation, no Jira tickets, nada. The release went live and all heck broke loose. Users were finding buttons overlapping on mobile, broken tooltips, form validation failures, inconsistent date formats, slow load times on certain views. None of it was technically blocking, but it made the experience feel amateurish. Cue a very uncomfortable post-mortem with the client. The product owner asked why none of these issues were found during QA. I just smiled and said, well, they were found, but per your instruction, I didn't log them. Silence. Mike tried to chime in, but the damage was done. Upper management got wind of the fiasco and mandated that all issues, regardless of severity, must be logged going forward. Mike was moved to a different team shortly after. Not just because of this, but it didn't help. And I got an apology and a thank you from the product owner. Okay, so you were literally being told not to do your job. That is just like ridiculous. I'm sorry. If you're Mike, surely you just need to lose the ego and be like, you know what? Yeah, these bugs are important to me. I want to be proud of the code that I put out as well and not feel like, okay, I've put it out. Somebody has said to me that it's fine when actually in reality I've told them not to tell me things that are wrong with it. I don't know. It's the sort of person that Mike is, but I'm thinking like if I was in that position, yeah, I'm sure it is annoying if somebody's telling you there's a bug here, there's a bug here, there's a bug here, but do you not want to hear about those bugs so that you can be proud of what you eventually do put out, knowing that it's error-free? Who wants to put out something that just doesn't work like this? I mean, this is just really embarrassing. You put out a product, there are very basic problems. Like if you have buttons overlapping on mobile, that just looks terrible. And that is an immediate, for me, I'm not using that anymore. Simple as that. Do you really want to not know about that before you put that product out? I mean, that's just insane. The one thing I would say is, did you get that request to stop the logging in writing? Because you need to be able to, well, I don't know, your PO sort of, actually, no, I don't know. The product owner has said it's fine. But I'm just like, in the future, maybe something may have happened where Mike had gone, well, I never said that. Where are the bugs? You didn't find them. That's on you, just to cover your back. But yeah, ultimately, absolutely fine. You did well. It's just like, again, I do sometimes feel very grateful for not having to work in a place like this where you're not even allowed to do your job properly because of some idiot that says, can you just not do it? That would just really annoy me. But yeah, there we go. Stop this and tell me what's going on right now. Hey all. If you know me, you know that I operate a drive-thru in the Wild West, living the dream in Arizona. Things are hectic here at Mendy's, but it's been admittedly a little more so and in a very different way since a certain brand of the devil's lettuce has been legalized. Like people are straight up wandering around the valley looking like they just landed on planet Arizona, not knowing the basics of life. I mean, I'm having to explain toilets, doors, water bottles. Oh, you gotta twist it, bruh. Gnarls. And especially the drive-thru. It's like Idiocracy come to life, and we've got a crew of Luke Cunningham-Wilsons and Maya Rudolphs trying to make it through our day. Last night, another one of these aliens entered our airspace. So I approached with my usual greeting, one of 2 possible. Hi, welcome to Mendy's. Please hold on a second and I'll be right with you. It's policy that we must greet the car within 5 seconds, preferably 3, of them setting our bell off when they drive close enough for their window to reach the speaker. So if we're busy with a previous order or orders, we'll greet and have them hold. Well, this wasn't cutting it for this car full of Dak Shepherds. As soon as I told them to hold, they were, what? What the frick? Nah, you talk to the other guy, man. I swear to God. Bruh, tell me what's going on right now, man. What's going on? Don't say no more words till you tell me what's going on right now, man. Wow, just friggin' wow. This was a peppering of words fired at me Nerf style by the entire car of people. It was hard to say who said what, but I applied my MC to all of them, spray and pray style. Well, sir, you're currently in a drive-thru of an Arizona Mendy's. By pulling your vehicle up to our speaker, you are entering into a social contract where I listen to what food you would like to order from our restaurant and put that into our system so our amazing chefs know what to make for you. Sometimes I don't have time to take that order with immediacy, so I'll tell you to hold until I'm ready to enter your order. I can only enter your order when I'm standing within reaching distance of the POS and when I'm logged in. If I've told you to hold on, in about 30 seconds or less, I will then take your order. Do you understand? Great. Now hold on while I figure out what's going on with the previous order. Then they respond, "Oh, no freaking way. All of that and I still have to wait. You could have taken my order already. We're out of here." I try to reply as I hear them peeling out. "Sir?" But it was too late. They hit the car in front of them. They were so angry that they forgot how stupidly high they were. They literally rammed the car in front of them. They both had to pull forward, but the car in front refused to move because they didn't want these guys taking off. It shut our drive-thru down for an hour and a half. Our lobby was rocking. The kids, all 4 of them, each got arrested. 3 in handcuffs, 1 with his parents. It was a melee. 1 kid wound up getting hauled off after everything. The car was towed, and the other kids wound up in tears at the end of it. Much drugs were involved based on smell alone, and grape of all flavors. I mean, the main thing that springs to mind after hearing this story is just, wow, what a place Arizona must be. If that's kind of the norm, then get me there on holiday. It sounds interesting, to say the least. I will say that what they were doing was obviously highly illegal. And yeah, good thing that they kind of got found out for it, although they did cause damage in the end. But wow, just have a little bit of patience, lads. Get your food and F off. Everyone would have been chilled. Although you were driving high, which once again is illegal. So yeah, probably for the best that this happened, really. Now for our next malicious compliance post. Oh, this isn't my yard? All of this is your yard. My wife and I bought our first home in early 2021 at the perfect time. Our house is in an older neighborhood, but is a new build. Prior to the house being built, it was just a plot of land that was overgrown with trees and bushes. We bought our house and the backyard needed work. There was about 100 feet deep of backyard that we could play with, but that was all due to some overgrowth of vines, bushes, small trees, bamboo, you name it. To give some context, our plot of land is shaped like a parallelogram. It doesn't just go straight like a rectangle. Our yard is sort of angled. My wife and I worked hard to start clearing it out. It turns out we still had about 25 feet deep of backyard to play with once all the rubbish was removed. We started out in the center and cleared it out, then started working on the sides of the overgrowth. We got to the neighbor to our left and found our survey stake, so we stopped there. We started on the other side, and after a few days of working on it, we came outside to a patchwork fence from our neighbor to the right. This fence was just tree limbs and things stabbed into the ground. We still had a good 15 feet or so to reach our other stake, but seeing as though we hadn't met or talked to these neighbors yet, we decided to stop there for now since it was getting colder out and we didn't want to step on the new neighbor's toes. Fast forward a few months and it's springtime. That patchwork fence had long fallen down and limbs and things had been removed. I start mowing my lawn and I mow from my front stake diagonally to where my back stake is, which I'm able to see pretty clearly through the overgrowth. I start cutting the overgrowth and I get through most of it that day. I make a huge pile in the back of my yard and a company comes out the next day to remove the brush with 4 truckloads. The next week I go to cut my grass and see that there's rocks and sticks laid down way into my yard, about halfway down, and it goes all the way back to where the original patchwork fence was. I'm curious as to why my neighbor would put them there, so I started doing some research. I pulled out our survey from when the house was being built and I started walking our property line. From our front marker to our back marker matched. So I walked between the back left marker to the back right marker. It also matched. Our survey said 115 feet of length between survey pins. I used both a really long tape measure and one of those walking measures and got within plus or minus 3 of 115 feet. So I knew that we were right on the spot. Of note, I'd also tried introducing myself to my neighbors and the husband was quiet but nice, but the wife just ignored us. No waves, no smiles, nothing. So I move the rocks to the back of my yard and throw the sticks in the yard waste bin. I finish cutting the grass and start working on spraying the little root systems from the brush that I had removed the week prior. All of a sudden, our male neighbor comes outside and walks towards me. He says that Hey, just so you know, you removed our privacy plants that help conceal us from the people behind us. Not sure if you thought your yard extended this far or what, but this is all our yard. I'll tell him that, well, our survey shows that the distance between these two pins in the back should be 115 feet, which is what I got when I measured them. Also, from measuring from the front pins to the bottom pins, both of these numbers were about right as well. So everything is matching up on our survey. He says, well, my wife works for the city, and they can see exactly where the plots are, and my plot goes to here, while pointing like 15 feet into my yard. I tell him that we can split the cost of a survey if he wants, but he's not interested and goes inside. I keep doing my thing in my yard, and 2 weeks pass by and I go to cut the grass again. There are now bricks, rocks, more limbs, yard spray paint, and flags 15 feet into my yard. I'm now really irritated. I knock on the door with no answer despite them both being home. I know this because I could see them through the window when cutting grass. I also saw they were live viewing me on the Ring. I move what I can and I finish cutting the grass. I go to Lowe's and pick up some string and run string from my front stake to my back stake. Next week it's cut and laying way inside my yard. When he was getting into his car later that evening, I ask why they cut my string. Oh, my mower must have run over it. I tell him that's strange that his mower ran over it and ended up in my yard, where he says that my yard ends. I then tell him that my survey is new and more likely to be right than whatever system his wife is using to determine plots. He tells me, well, then I guess you're gonna have to pay to get a new survey done. Okay, I will. I got many quotes, and the two lowest I got were $550 and $980. The highest I got was $4,400. The $550 was from the company who did the original survey before the house was built. I'm not sure why the price was so vastly different for the same services, but whatever. I pay that $550 and have the survey done. They put up a total of 15 stakes down that side of my property line. The kicker? I was wrong. My yard didn't go to where I thought it did. Instead, it went further into their yard by as much as 4 feet in some places. I was confused and I asked a surveyor to explain. Apparently, there used to be an old rock feature between our houses that was mostly on my neighbour's plot, but some was on the empty plot where my house was built. My neighbour didn't want to deal with the hassle of trying to tear down and rebuild certain spots, so the builder paid him for the land the rock wall sat on, plus about a foot into their yard, and the builder removed the rock wall. I had the pins down and was worried they'd try to mess with them, so I bought some outdoor cameras and pointed them at my property line. We went on vacation, and when we came back, yep, the stakes were gone. I leave another note because they don't answer and explain that what they did was illegal and how we needed to talk about it, and I left my number. I watch the video and see his wife taking up all of the stakes. I don't hear anything for a few days, so I end up speaking with the husband while he was about to go for a run. He claims he never got my note and didn't know anything about any stakes. I tell him I have his wife on video removing the stakes. He says he'll talk to her. I get a text that night apologizing and saying they won't remove the stakes again. What happened to not getting my note that had my number? I'm like, no, you won't remove the stakes again, and you will be paying for another survey. He says that they didn't know it was done by an actual surveyor. I tell him it doesn't matter. We go back and forth before he eventually concedes after I threaten small claims or even the police. I call the original surveyors and explain the situation. They say, well, we don't want to do a job that has potential criminal implications like this, so we won't do it again. I then call the next lowest quote I got. They were now able to do it for $900. I say, let me get back to you and I'll let my neighbor know. He's fuming, saying no way is that right. A survey doesn't cost that much, blah, blah, blah. I tell him he's free to get his own quote for that side of the yard and give him 5 companies I tried. Not the original, since they didn't want to be involved. A week passes and I ask him what quote he ended up getting that was the cheapest, and he says it was the $900, but he wouldn't be paying it. I tell him, okay, pay the $500 fine, get a misdemeanor, and we'll go to small claims, and you'll still end up owing me since I have it on video and via text. The next day, I am handed $900, all in $10 and $5 bills, and he walked off. The $900 quote ended up going back up to over $1,000 since we waited too long and they had too many bookings. I called the original company and I told them that, hey, we settled our differences, he paid me for the cost of the survey, and I'm just going to go and get another one done. Could you come out and do it? And they came out and did it for the same $550. So I now have a fence and trees lining both sides of my yard, and I believe the neighbors are moving soon based on the furniture I see them taking out. You know what? I actually just love stories like this, where you get someone that is so petty and so kind of selfish, saying, no, you're definitely wrong. Trust me. And they know that they're in the wrong, but they don't really care. They're just like, no, this is what I have in my mind. This is going to be the case no matter what, no matter what you do. And in the end, if they'd just been nice the whole time and neighborly and just a good person, they would have ended up with more backyard, because you never would have called this survey in, would you? You would have just said, I think it's up to here. And they would have said, realistically, yeah, you're right. But now, because of the new survey, they get less space. It's just so dumb. Like, it is, in effect, stealing someone else's property or land if you do say to somebody that, in effect, their land is yours. So it's just great karma that this has been put right back on them. And yeah, as a result, their property is smaller. Good stuff. Also, I will just say they do sound like horrible people as well. So that makes this malicious compliance a lot better as well. Really enjoyed this one. Now for our last malicious compliance post of this episode. My EMT job won't give me my state-provided PTO illness leave when I quit because I didn't request it at the time I was sick? Weird. I'm suddenly feeling feverish. My EMT job largely hired 18 to 22-year-olds who usually had this as their first ever job. They heavily emphasized that employees who are part-time get no PTO, but kept the state-provided illness PTO heavily under wraps. So the majority of people had zero clue that it could be used at any time that you had to call in sick. I'd gotten sick many times during my time working there because it was the COVID era, and not once did they breathe about taking paid time off, despite there being an entire process involving HR to take time off for COVID. Granted, yes, they could have assumed that I knew or whatever, but trust me when I say this place was predatory when it came to paying us minimum wage as EMTs, and not a single person that even worked there for years knew about it. On my second to last day of my 2-week notice, I discovered that there was an indication of PTO in my file, which we'd all largely ignored since we were told that we don't get any. Here is how that conversation went. I noticed that my file states I have unused PTO. I'm confused because we were told we don't receive PTO at all since we're part-time. HR replied, that's state-mandated PTO for illness. Well, since I haven't used it, will I see it in my last paycheck? No, it's only for illness leave. I got COVID twice working here and had to take weeks off. Can it be used retroactively for that? No, it has to be requested at the same time as when you're taking off. Well, that would have been nice to know when I contacted HR multiple times for sick leave regarding COVID. Weird how nobody thought to offer it or ask if I intended on using it. I have 2 shifts left this week that I'm willing to work, but can we figure out a way for me to receive the health PTO? No, that's not possible. You will also be unable to request a recommendation letter if you call off at all during your 2-week notice due to a lack of professionalism. So in order for me to get that money, I would have had to call in sick and request that I use my medical PTO at the same time. Yes. Okay, so I'm calling to let you know that I have to call off today and tomorrow because I'm not feeling well and I'd like to use my PTO. Well, are you really sick? If I'm sick, will I get to use my medical PTO? Well, yes, but then yes, I'm sick. I'll be using all 16 hours of my PTO health leave. I also want to make sure this is documented as an excused medical absence so I'm not penalized for calling off of shifts during my 2-week notice. Yeah, now this is just a little bit disgusting. Like, if a company is hiding a policy that is to benefit their workers, that's just a little bit shady, isn't it? Come on. I get it, you're temps, you're not full-time, but still, if there is some sort of benefit or mandate that you can use when you're ill, that they're electing to not really tell you about, even though it is in the rules and regs, that is very poor form from them. Maybe it's on you, I guess, to know these things, but clearly they're pretty much hiding it. And only in situations like this, where you get someone like OP who really delves into it and finds out their real rights, do they actually get found out? It's a bit of a disgrace, isn't it, really? Come on. Like, so you're telling me that you're ill despite working, in the EMT, and you don't get any money? Crazy. Very tough. I know they're not full-time, they're not full-time employees, but still, that's a bit of a joke. The one thing that you have to do now, though, is tell all your colleagues, all, former colleagues as well. I don't know if you could go back and sue or not sue, but you could probably go back and say, look, I was, owed this money from when I was sick because of the PTO that we weren't told about. But anyway, at the very minimum, current colleagues or people that work there now that may not know about this, you have to tell them. You have to make it your duty. Think of all the money that you could make and save current employees, but also the anxiety. I mean, imagine thinking that you're not going to get paid because you're ill. People would probably go into work very ill in order to get paid, right? So, you're probably saving people's health as well as making them a lot of money. It's just disgraceful to have this in place, but not tell your workers about it. Great malicious compliance right there. Get your manager here so we can talk to you about your manners. Have fun looking for a new job then. My company takes safety very seriously, to the point we have safety briefings on the regular to keep us updated. Yesterday, we had a talk on compactor safety. One of our big rules is to never, ever, under any circumstances, climb into a compactor unless it's unhooked from any power sources. It sounds like common sense, right? Well guys, as you're about to learn, apparently common sense isn't that common. After getting our briefing, we get our assignments and are sent on our merry way. I go to my area, clean it and pull trash. As I'm walking to the compactor, what do I see sticking out of it but 2 trousered legs? After the shock lasting a nanosecond wore off, I start yelling, "What are you doing, you idiot? Don't go crawling around in there." I know I shouldn't have yelled, but I was so mad. Well, Mr. Idiot fell out and starts yelling at me. "Don't you go yelling at me. Where's your manager? Get them here right now." Malicious compliance mode activated. I put on my sweetest smile and say, "Of course, I'm so sorry. Let's get my manager here." Mr. Idiot smirks and is like, "Good girl." So I call my manager over and ask her to come over. Meanwhile, Mr. Idiot is smiling like the cat who got the cream. I'm fighting to keep from smiling. I know that my manager, Miss Heroin, takes safety as seriously as I do. I've seen her reduce full-grown men to tears over safety issues. Miss Heroin shows up and Mr. Idiot says, "You should train your workers to not yell." Miss Heroin turns to me. "And why were you yelling at him?" "Because I caught him climbing into the compactor and I got scared he'd be crushed." In a nanosecond, Mr. Idiot goes from looking like a contented cat to looking like a scolded dog. After a sound verbal thrashing, Miss Heroin calls Mr. Idiot's manager. Within 30 minutes, Mr. Idiot was clearing out his desk, still smelling of garbage. And there we go, a wonderful bit of malicious compliance. The fact that you clearly knew you were going to do this the entire time is brilliant. It's literally like, somebody call an ambulance, but not for me. Love it. Now for our next story of malicious compliance. Only do what is in my job title? Fine. Good luck paying employees. So, I work for a construction company as an inventory admin. My job is to basically schedule counts of our warehouse and input the numbers they give me for inventory. Then try to see what the problem is when the numbers on the last count and current count don't add up. There's a little bit more to it, but I won't bore you with the specifics. The problem with this job is that when you've been doing it long enough and are good at it, there is less work to do. In the beginning, when counting 1 rack out of 60 racks of material would take a few days, it was fine because I was always busy. But now that everything is in order, the entire warehouse can be counted in 3 days. This leaves me bored for most of the time. So to fix this, I studied up on our cloud-based ERP service that we use for all internal and external transactions and have become sort of an expert on it. Every single aspect of this company uses this ERP service to do their job. Timesheets, HR, payroll, accounting, scheduling, management, manufacturing, ordering from vendors, delivering inventory, etc. It all runs through this ERP service. So it's very important that this service is up and running perfectly 24/7. I became so proficient in the service that our VP decided to cut ties with our consultants of the ERP because I could do what they did, but better, quicker, and much cheaper. For reference, we were paying these consultants $5,000 a month just to be on standby if we needed them for some sort of problem that could arise from using this ERP, and we had to dish out more money to fix those problems depending on how many hours of their time was spent to fix said problems. Not sure on their exact rate, but it was something like $200 an hour, and they took weeks to fix anything, while I could fix the problem in time for my daily afternoon poop break. I never got an official job title or raise of any kind for being an expert on this service. The company just saw me being able to do it and let me fix things that happened, so they no longer needed the outside help. I wasn't too upset because it gave me something to do, so I was glad to help the company save money, even if none of that money fell my way. Let's skip ahead a few months now. We now have a new warehouse manager, and someone in the warehouse screws something up in inventory by sending a bunch of materials to the wrong job with no record of it being shipped. We're talking a $500,000 screw up here. In the same day, our ERP had an update that caused a bunch of bugs with our accounting departments. So I decided to work on the ERP problem first because the warehouse F-up is more of a delay screw up and not actually stopping anybody from doing their job at the moment, while this accounting problem means our bills are not able to be paid. You can guess what kind of issues we will have if bills are not paid. The ERP bug turns out to be quite big and numerous, so it ends up taking me a couple of days to figure out, but I fixed it before any bills are actually due and decided to take lunch a little early to celebrate a victory. Crisis averted. The new warehouse manager storms into my office after I get back from lunch and is livid. Apparently, the bosses were putting the blame on him for the warehouse screw-up, and considering he is the one who oversees shipments and personnel in the warehouse, the blame is rightfully placed. He starts laying into me, asking why I've not fixed the problem yet, yelling and screaming like a child. I tried explaining that I was fixing an ERP issue and have not had time to look at the warehouse problem yet. He gets even more angry and notes that it's funny how I have time to take early lunches but not actually do my job. That started to annoy me, but I held my tongue and kept calm about the situation. He then ordered me to only do what is in my job title and to leave the ERP BS to the people competent enough to handle it, as he put it. Since this guy was technically my supervisor, I had no choice but to obey. I asked him to send me that in writing, and he snarks and storms back into his office. 5 minutes later, I get an email stating that under no circumstances am I to work on anything related to ERP unless it involves inventory. Cue malicious compliance. I do nothing but inventory from that point forward, knowing dang well that we would be essentially coasting until we hit a problem that I would refuse to fix. Sure enough, not even a week later, I get an email from HR that some sort of bug in the ERP system was preventing them from accessing payroll to pay employees this week. I reply with an apology that I am no longer able to work on ERP bugs due to the supervisor and to refer to the ERP system help guide for further assistance. I knew the help guide was not going to help her in the slightest, but it was no longer my problem, so I wasn't going to deal with it. Skip a few days later to Friday. I checked my bank account in the morning before getting to work and laughed because there was no money deposited. That problem never got fixed. I hurry up and get to work, excited to see the chaos unfold, and what I was expecting was an understatement. When I show up to work, I see the entire warehouse staff of 50 people walking out the front door. I stopped one and asked why they're leaving, and they replied with, "I didn't get paid today, so I'm not coming back until I do." I go into the office and see the warehouse manager in a panic. He has jobs that need material and nobody to load it onto trucks or deliver. I ask him if he needs help with anything, and he just screams at me to leave his office because he's getting phone calls out of his butt from superintendents of jobs asking why our material has not arrived yet. I pass by HR on the way to my office and see a bunch of the bosses huddled up over her computer with her, with angry and confused expressions on their face, I guess trying to figure out the problem. I felt bad for her because it really was something out of her control, but I knew she would ultimately be okay, because she'd been there for so long that they would never fire her. When I get to my office, I see the VP waiting for me there. He has a very annoyed expression on his face. When we get inside, he demands to know why I did not fix the problem in HR when she emailed me about it. I replied that I'm no longer allowed to work on ERP problems as it isn't in my job title. He has the most shocked look on his face, and he asked why all of a sudden I had a change of heart. I show him the email from the warehouse manager and I could see the dots connect in his head. He immediately storms out and I see him heading straight to the warehouse manager's office. They were in there for a few hours, but eventually he comes back to my office. He seems calmer now, and he asked me politely if I can fix the problem in HR and if I can resume fixing the ERP if needed. At this point, I liked the relief of responsibility, and I told him that I'd only do it if he put it officially in my job title along with a raise. His calmness then turned to anger again, and he says, "I cannot believe you," as he storms out and returns to his office. A few hours later, he sends out a mass email that he's hired the old ERP consultants to fix the problem, and that next week, everyone would be paid for the money they are owed, along with the money they earned if they return to work. This one surprised me, as he'd rather pay over $60,000 a year to consultants than just give me a few extra bucks an hour for better work. I think he expected me to change my mind and just do it for my own paycheck. But I decided to wait because I knew how these consultants were. And if they managed to fix this problem in a week, I would streak naked through the office. Most of the warehouse staff agreed to return, but were still upset about not getting paid. Sure enough, next Friday comes around. Nobody gets paid again. At this point, it's becoming a real problem, and the entire staff is becoming agitated. They have bills to pay. I even heard a bunch at the warehouse talking about some competitors nearby that they could go and work for. At this point, I even considered just fixing the problem, because the warehouse didn't deserve to be treated like that due to poor management. Maybe I'm the jerk here for this, but I am severely underpaid and can barely afford my apartment. There's no reason I should do extra work for free. That same day, the VP returns to my office and hands me papers. These papers said that I would be promoted to a newly created position that dealt with inventory and ERP upkeep. It would be its own department, and he would be my direct supervisor. It also came with a hefty raise. All I had to do was sign and agree. I looked up at him after reading the paper, and he had the saddest look on his face. Please, just sign it. The consultants said it would take them weeks to get around to fixing it due to the high volume of clients they've taken on, and we cannot keep skipping paychecks. I happily signed it and immediately got to work on the HR issue. I managed to even fix it that same day. It was just a simple problem with the permissions of HR and payroll in the ERP due to an update. Well, that was a truly phenomenal story, and I loved every second of it. It started off pretty mundane. I was thinking, here we go, a lot of technological jargon that I'm not going to enjoy, but by the end, it was simply sublime. What a story. Phenomenal malicious compliance. The thing that just sticks in my head though is that this all could have started much earlier. In reality, there was no need for this entire event and chaos to happen for you to get that big pay rise and get what you deserve. That should have happened a long time ago. Ultimately, if you're doing the work of an entire company of consultants who are charging $5,000 a month, but you're doing it better and quicker, then you should at least be earning that money. It doesn't matter if it takes you 2 seconds. The point isn't the time it takes, just as the point isn't that you can do your amazing inventory work in a few days either. Time is not related to money. That is an old-fashioned way of thinking. If someone has honed their craft and is really good and experienced and is just very efficient and excellent at what they do, I have no cares for how long it takes them to do it. Just do it really well in half a second and I'll pay you the exact same amount, if not more, than someone who would do it worse, but it would take them a year. Yeah, that's an extreme example, but you get what I'm saying. Time is not important. Quality is all that matters. Now, if you don't understand that and you just think, oh, someone's not working that hard because it takes them 2 seconds, but they're still doing an amazing job, I'm going to pay them less, then that's on you. And that is a problem with your management team, clearly. And to be fair, probably is a problem with a lot of management teams in the world right now. All I will say is it's a good thing that you did eventually get that raise. However, you still should be pushing for a 60k raise, minimum, not the raise that you probably got, unless the VP did give you a 60k raise, but it kind of seems unlikely. Maybe 60k is a little bit too much, but hey, you are providing the value of $60,000 worth of money to this company, therefore you should be getting it. That's just what I'm saying. Nonetheless, great malicious compliance and fair play for holding off, because I know you would have been tempted. You said it yourself. You would have been so tempted to go, okay, I want to get these people paid now. I'm just going to fix it. But no, you did what you had to do, and ultimately you deserve the raise. And now for our final malicious compliance story of this episode. HOA tried to punish us, told us to stop them if we can. Malicious compliance cost them 16% of the annual HOA income, and the cameras are still installed today. This happened several years ago and is a multi-year long story. I'll keep it as succinct as possible. We installed cameras in front of our home that were looking at our vehicles. Part of the camera angles did overlook parts of 2 neighbors' properties, one backyard and one side yard. The cameras were battery operated and had a function where you could grey out areas that you didn't want to film. When motion occurred in the grayed out areas, the cameras would not be activated to film. The neighbors' entire properties and several bushes on our property were grayed out. We did this when installing them. One of the neighbors was a friend and had no issues with this whatsoever. We showed her the camera angle and she said she didn't really care whether or not we grayed out that area. We still left it grayed out over battery life concerns. The other neighbor's name was Karen. Not really, but we all know why I chose that name. Now, Karen was on the HOA board, and as you can imagine, we didn't get along with Karen or the HOA board. We told her about the camera and showed her the grayed out areas at the same time we told our friendly neighbor about it. It was simply an FYI conversation. We're not on friendly terms. Not an asking permission conversation. But she told us to take the cameras down immediately or we would regret it. About a week after we hung the camera up, we got a notice from our HOA that we were violating the bylaws. The bylaw in question, a nuisance to your neighbours bylaw. There wasn't a specific bylaw preventing placement of cameras, so this is all they could find to try and punish us. We responded with a letter detailing how we were not violating any bylaws or laws in general and asked them to cease and desist. We all know how these stories go though. They did not cease and they did not desist. Their first response? The HOA has the right to enforce these bylaws. Try to stop us if you think you can. These types of responses were, unfortunately, quite common from this board. We entered this battle with one goal in mind, to cost them as much money and time as possible. The HOA hired a lawyer specifically to fight us. To my knowledge, this has not happened to any other residents. In the following 4 months, we ended up costing the HOA over $4,000 in lawyers' fees fighting this battle. For reference, the entire HOA income was roughly $25,000 per year. When it came time for our official HOA hearing over the matter, we had successfully postponed it, thanks to an attorney friend, 3 separate times. There were over 100 back and forth emails with the HOA attorney and ourselves. Each one of those emails was a 15-minute expense for the HOA. And I was happy to follow up a follow-up question with another follow-up question if it meant the HOA attorney was going to keep billing them. Did I say follow up enough times? We didn't actually want to take this battle to court, so we ended up removing the cameras the day of the hearing to prevent being fined, even if the fine wouldn't hold up in court. The HOA decided in the hearing that we were guilty, surprise surprise, of violating the bylaw. They couldn't fine us, as the bylaws don't allow a fine until after a hearing has been held, and the cameras were already removed. In the end, the punishment was a sternly written piece of paper on the attorney's letterhead, delivered via certified mail, that stated that we were not allowed to place a camera on our home that had the potential to invade a neighbour's privacy. Keep in mind, the letter specifically stated the camera could not be placed on our home. We left the cameras off of the home for about 4 months, until the annual HOA meeting. You should have seen the look on the HOA board's faces when I asked them to explain the $4,000 line item for attorney's fees that simply stated title searches, attorney fees. The board actually tried to hide the fact that they spent $4,000 trying to fight us over a couple of cameras by putting the fees in as title searches. Needless to say, that meeting did not go well for them. About half of them lost their positions on the board. The other half, including Karen, unfortunately, remained on the board. About a week after the annual meeting, we installed new cameras, facing the same direction as the prior cameras. Only this time, we installed a post in the ground and mounted the cameras to that post. The admonishment we received after the hearing specifically stated that we were not allowed to install cameras on our home and said nothing about putting them on a post. They did send a letter to try to tell us to remove the cameras, but a sternly worded response indicating that we were prepared to fight them actually worked this time around. I guess they didn't want to spend another $4,000 fighting us. We didn't receive any follow-up responses, and the cameras on the post are still installed to this day, over 2 years and running strong. You see, whether it be on malicious compliance like this, or entitled parents, prorevenge, literally any other subreddit on the internet, I've never actually read a story about an HOA that's ever painted it in any sort of positive light ever. So guys, I guess I'm asking you right now, if you are part of an HOA or your house has an HOA board or whatever, I don't even know how they work, to be honest. I think my grandparents live on a street where there's an HOA. I don't really know. And I don't know if it's a good thing or not. Pretty much. If there's anything positive about an HOA that you know, drop it in the comments down below if you're watching on YouTube. Because so far, over the 4 years I've been doing this, I've not seen one positive thing. Does it exist? I don't know. What is the benefit of them? What even are they? Why are we here? These are all very pertinent questions. But again, with this one, like, what are they doing? Really? A camera on one tiny bit of your property that has literally been grayed out and your neighbor has shown you this? Why do you care? What sort of life are you leading to which you would actually care about this? If anything, it's a good thing, right? What if something was to happen to your house you were being robbed, and the thief happened to go on just that one little part of your property that was in the camera view of your neighbor's cameras. You'd be thanking your lucky stars, let me tell you. Then you'd catch them and you'd get all your stuff back, and it would be a hallelujah moment, and you'd say, thank you, I'm forever grateful, neighbors, for having that wonderful camera. But no, instead you want to spend $4,000 for no reason at all. Why? I just don't really get it. No one ever makes it hot enough? Okay, then you ask for it. I used to be a chef in a Mexican restaurant in a small town in Australia nearly 40 years ago. We were modestly popular and I loved working there. One night, a young man came in to dine with a young lady. It was very obviously a first date. They ordered nachos to share with a side of jalapenos for their entree, and he ordered a steak Veracruz, hot, for his main, and the young lady ordered a chicken burrito, mild, for hers. I, as I usually did throughout the nights, would walk around the tables and ask if people were enjoying the food. After the nachos, I checked on them, and the young man informed me that the chili that accompanied the nachos was not hot at all, and that he loved hot food. I was informed that he had traveled extensively and had eaten some of the hottest food in the world, and that no one had ever made a dish too hot for him. He reiterated that he wanted his steak main extra hot. To be honest, I found him to be pompous and rather obnoxious in the way he was speaking down to me, and found myself taking a disliking to him. I will add at this point that the young lady was looking a little uncomfortable, and I got the impression her date was not going as she had expected. I headed to the kitchen. I made her a lovely chicken burrito while putting together his steak. He wanted it hot. He was going to get it. Our steak Veracruz was usually a steak cooked and topped with our house tomato sauce base with some capsicums, bell peppers for you Americans, and onions with a touch of chili. On this occasion, I set to work. Keep in mind, this was Australia back in the 80s, and we did not get a lot of different chilies back then, and a jalapeno was considered hot by most Aussie palates. Hey, we were an uneducated bunch. I had a few bird's eye chilies in the kitchen that were mainly there for the staff and the resident Mexican guitarist's meals, so I started with those. I finally diced about 10 of those with their seeds. I then started sweating off my onions and capsicums. I then threw in the chilies, and then I added about a tablespoon of chili powder and about a tablespoon of cayenne. I soon felt the fumes hit my nose and the back of my throat, and my eyes started watering. I ran to the door of the kitchen to get a breath of breathable air, as the air in my tiny kitchen was rapidly becoming unbreathable. I ran back to my pan and put a ladle of the house tomato sauce in. I then let that simmer for a few minutes. I then added some chopped up jalapenos from a jar in my fridge and thought, why not? And in went a little bit more chili powder. I then put the flash fried steak in to finish it off in the sauce. I served it all up on a plate with some rice, served out the chicken burrito, and hit the bell for the waitress to serve it to the table. The waitress came back and told me that as she placed it in front of him, he said, "This had better be hot." She assured him the chef had done as he requested. I went to the door of the kitchen, joined by my waitress, to watch the show unfold, and unfold it did. I watched with glee as he sliced the steak, took a piece on his fork, and with a smug look on his face, he put it in his mouth. He took a chew and then realized his mistake. I saw it. That moment when his face changed, but he was trying so hard not to show it. He couldn't. He was on a date and he'd bragged so hard, and now he had to go through with it. He ate the steak. I could see every ounce of pain on his face. He struggled. He struggled hard. His date watched him with a slight smile on her lips, and I got the impression that she was thoroughly enjoying his pain. He went through several jugs of water. He sweated. He barely spoke. He looked danged uncomfortable. At the end of the meal, I came out of the kitchen and asked him if he'd enjoyed. His words could have been hotter. He never came back. His date, she became a regular and told us he was an insufferable fool and she never saw him again. I have no regrets other than I wish Carolina Reapers had been around then. You know what? I think that everybody in their life has met someone like this guy. Someone that just wants to show off, act as if they're just way more cool than they really are, when in reality, they're just making themselves look stupid. As you've seen by this girl's reaction, she wasn't having any of it. No one likes arrogance and cockiness. There's no need for that. The great thing about stories in this subreddit is that a lot of the time, people like OP are doing literally as they're asked. You know, the guy said, make it as hot as you possibly can. He did that, and he couldn't deal with it. That is just brilliant, because you're doing what he said, and he can't handle it. So get out. Now for our next malicious compliance story. Why did they get in for free? Let me fix that. I used to work as a bouncer/doorman at a bar that charged a $2 cover on weekend nights. Everyone paid to get in with only one exception: party buses. We had an agreement with the different party bus operators that if they brought their groups to our bar, they would get in for free. Lively crowds are good for business. So one night I'm working and a guy comes in with his girlfriend and I tell him it's $2 a head. He grumbles about it and I give him the same line I tell anyone who complains. A $2 cover is the cheapest thing you will buy here tonight. If you can't afford it, you might want to go somewhere else. He doesn't want to look cheap in front of his lady, so of course he pays. A couple of minutes later, he's back, saying he just talked to some people who didn't have to pay, and wants to know why he got singled out. I tell him about the party bus rule and say those people must have come in on a bus. He motions towards some people sitting with his girlfriend and tells me, "You didn't charge my friends and they didn't come on a bus." I recognize the people, and when they came in, I asked them if they were from the bus, and they had said yes. So they lied to me. It happens and normally I wouldn't worry about it. I tell him, well, it sounds like I made a mistake. I guess it's their lucky night. That's my hint to him that he should let it go. But that's not good enough for him. He gets louder and keeps demanding I refund his $4 to keep things fair. I've had it with him. I tell him, "You're right, it's not fair. Let me fix it for you." He smirks because he thinks he's getting a refund, but he doesn't realize that all I'm giving is some sweet malicious compliance. His smirk disappeared when I stepped away from the cash drawer and walked over to where his friends were sitting. In my most polite voice, I said, "Hey, sorry to bother you guys, but there's a $2 cover tonight, and your friend here told me you didn't pay. I must have misheard you when I asked if you were here with the party bus, but I need to collect the cover from you now." The looks of betrayal they gave him were priceless. I collected their covers, smiled, and loudly thanked him for being so honest. Then I walked back to my post and watched them proceed to rip him a new one. I just don't get it. What did he expect to happen there? Did he really think that it was more likely that OP was going to say, "Okay, fine, I'll let you off," or go over to the other people who have lied to his face and get the money that is rightfully the properties, the companies, the bars? Like, he was obviously going to do that. What did this guy expect? And now, as expected, his friends are going to be like, "Well, mate, why did you do that? Why have you snaked us?" And he's going to have no answer. So dumb. Also, all this for $2. I mean, what? What is going on? I think that amount of money is literally just put in place to make sure that you don't get absolute wrong-uns coming into this establishment. $2, and you're complaining about it. How much to drink? What? I just don't get it. I just really don't get it. But hey, great malicious compliance nonetheless. Don't care about people calling me on your old number? I'll sort it. I had just moved to Australia and gotten a new phone. But as it turns out, my number was someone else's old number. Every other week, I'd get calls by a tradie who wanted to know why I wasn't on site, mate, or what I wanted done with building projects ABC. Every time I explained at length that they got the wrong number, and quite often folks on the other end were absolutely rude or thought I was taking the mick and insisted I answer their questions or show up on site now. I was over it, so I googled my own number and did some digging, and eventually found out the guy who had my number before, then his new number, and then I called him. I politely explained my dilemma, pointed out that there were 2 websites that still had his old, my now new number, and if he could please change this and let his contacts know about his new number and to delete the old one, as it was getting quite tedious for me. By that time, I'd used my number for work, visa applications, and landlords and friends, and changing it would have been a huge pain. I explained all of that. Well, of course, he was just as pleasant as most of his contacts, and told me something along the lines of, "I don't give a frick, mate. That's not my problem. Get screwed, sort your own stuff out, mate." Well, the universe provides, and so I got a great opportunity to do just that only a few weeks later. I received a call in the early hours of one morning by another disgruntled guy, telling me he was early and demanding to know where I wanted the sand put down and how to get in. I asked what sand, and was told he had a full truckload of sand as ordered, and no one was on site, and it was all fenced off. Very briefly did I think about launching into my explanation, but I was tired and over it, and then realized the opportunity provided. I snapped back at him with no uncertainty. "Mate, it's all good. Dump it all right in the driveway, in front of the fence. We'll sort it out when we get there." The guy said, "You sure, mate? It's a lot of sand." "Absolutely sure, mate. Thanks a lot." "All right then, boss," and he hangs up. Well, I go back to bed, snoozing for another hour with a big smile until my phone rings again, and I see it's old mate with his new number who I saved when I called him a few weeks ago. I pick up rather chipper, and he doesn't waste any time, launching into a series of swear words, and now he has no access to the site, and that he has to move a literal ton of sand by hand, and whether or not I told the sand guy to dump it all there. I replied, "You told me to sort this out myself. This is me sorting this out. You can remove the numbers and let your contacts know or not. Totally up to you, mate." He was fuming, calling me a few more choice words, promising to fire me and a lot more before we ended the conversation. However, the numbers disappeared from the internet really quickly after that, and I never got another call again. I still have my number, and every time I see a truck with sand, I chuckle to myself, thinking of this guy moving a ton of sand by hand and losing a fair few hours of labor because he was a douchebag and couldn't be bothered sending a few texts. An absolute gem of a malicious compliance story right there. I just picture this guy, right, coming up to this place and just seeing a literal ton of sand, a lump of sand blocking his way in and thinking, oh no, I really should have sent a few texts, shouldn't I? This is not going to be fun. And once again, his lack of getting on top of things and just being rude to you, OP, he deserves this. He really does. Once again, like the previous story, this guy clearly didn't have the brains to foresee how this would end. Therefore, it is on him. That's the beauty of this subreddit, as I said. The fact of the matter is, these guys are just bringing this horrible stuff onto themselves, and it's not even really OP's fault that this happened. What do you expect him to do? Say once again, or just say for the rest of time, sorry, this isn't my number? No, he's going to get fed up and he's going to make you make that change. And there you go, it happened. And now for our final malicious compliance story of this episode. This one with over 46,000 upvotes, by the way. Boss says, "If you're 1 minute late, I'm docking 15 minutes from your time. Gets mad when I don't work the 15 minutes I was docked for free." This happened about 4 years ago. I do construction and we start fairly early. My boss got tired of people walking in at 6:05 or 6:03 when we start at 6, even though he was a few minutes late more consistently than any of us were. So he said, "If you aren't standing in front of me at 6 o'clock when we start, then I'm docking 15 minutes from your time for the day." The next day, I accidentally forgot my tape measure in my car and had to walk back across the job site to grab it. Made it inside at 6:01. My boss chewed me out and told me he was serious yesterday and clocked me 15 minutes. So I took all my tools off right there and sat down on a bucket. He asked why I wasn't getting to work, and I said, "I'm not getting paid until 6:15, so I'm not doing any work until 6:15. I enjoy what I do, but I don't do it for free." He tried to argue with me about it until I said, "If you're telling me to work without paying me, then that's against the law. You really want to open the company and yourself up to that kind of risk? Maybe I'm the kind to sue, maybe I'm not, but if you keep on telling me to work after you docked my time, then we're going to find out one way or another." He shut up pretty quickly after that, and everyone else saw me do it and him cave. So now they're not going to take this rubbish either. Over the next few days, guys that would have been 1 or 2 minutes late just texted the boss, "Hey, sorry boss, would have been there at 6:02 and gotten docked, so I'll see you at 6:15 and I'll get to work then." And then they sit in their cars until 6:15 and came in when their time started. So between people doing what I did or just staying in their cars instead, he lost a ton of productivity and morale because he decided that losing 15 minutes of productivity per person and feeling like a big man was better than losing literally 1 or 2 minutes of productivity. Even though everyone stands around BSing and getting material together for the day until about 6:10 anyway. After a few weeks of that, he got chewed out by his boss over the loss of productivity and how bad the doc timesheets were looking and reflecting poorly on him as a leader because we were missing deadlines over it. And it showed that you don't know how to manage your people. And then suddenly his little self-implemented policy was gone and we all worked like we were supposed to and caught back up fairly quickly. Worker solidarity for the win. Not one person took his rubbish and worked that time for free after he tried to swing his weight around on them. But obviously I was a target after that and only made it 2 more months before he had stacked up enough BS reasons to get away with firing me when I called in a few days in a row after my mum fell and I took off work to care for her and monitor her for a while during the day. Yeah, I was going to say, OP, you kind of made yourself a target and I'm not too surprised that this happened. However, you've got to take solace in the fact and be proud that you as an individual have saved a lot of employees so much time. and money, I guess, by not working for free for 15 minutes. If you add up the collective 15-minute periods that you have saved your employees by doing what you did and taking a stand against your boss, that is a lot of time and money right there. So yeah, feel good about that. Well, he did say no matter what it was. I worked as a dispatcher for a small town police department out west. There was always a bit of a struggle with our patrol sergeants, who looked down his nose at dispatch, always trying to micromanage our department and bully our dispatch sergeants. One day, he discovered that dispatchers were handling small routine matters, such as answering questions from the public and handling other minor issues that didn't require a police response. He was outraged. He stomped around the station for a bit, then issued a memo. It began with a condescending essay about how dispatchers were not qualified to answer questions or handle minor issues, as only fully trained police officers were capable of such weighty matters. He then issued a directive that an officer would be sent on any call received from the public, no matter what it was. Our dispatch sergeant just smiled and told us to follow the directive, that she was sure it wouldn't last long. As luck would have it, I was on duty that very night, and I guess I was living right as the call came in. Then another and another. A rather bright meteor had gone harmlessly over the town at a fairly low altitude. Pretty spectacular, really, but obvious as to what it was. My phone rang off the hook, most just wanting to ask if anyone thought it had fallen to earth near the town. Not really an issue for the town police, but, well, he did say no matter what it was. The radio traffic went along these lines. Unit 28, stand by for traffic.
28.
28, this will be an attempt to locate. Advise when ready to copy.
28, go.
Be advised, this will be a greenish glowing object last seen at an estimated altitude of 3,500 feet, traveling in a northwesterly direction at approximately 1,500 miles per hour. If located, stop and identify occupants.
10-9.
At this point, the patrol sergeant, who's been listening in, shouts into his mic from his radio at home.
Did you get a call on this?
Affirmative, I reply. This station has received multiple calls, and per your directive, an officer has been dispatched. Cue the sound of a radio being slammed into a desk. The next morning, the issue was compounded a bit, as the responding officer also followed his directive and filed an official report noting that the object had fled our jurisdiction before contact could be made, and then recommended the matter be referred to the FBI for further investigation, as he had reason to believe the object had crossed state lines. Our captain-in-chief were laughing to tears, and our detective volunteered to go and assist the FBI investigation, theorizing it had gone to Vegas. A new memo was issued by the captain, stating that dispatchers were to have full discretion in the handling of calls and minor matters for the public. I mean, what a way to start an episode. You did exactly as he said, and that is the entire point of this subreddit. So good. The object has fled our jurisdiction. I need to go to Las Vegas and help the FBI. Sensational. Can you just imagine this bloke at home, listening in, thinking, oh my god, what have I done? Knowing in the back of his head that he is the one that made this all happen in the first place. Wow, what a mug you've made him look. Fair play. Try and stick to the planning and the correct methods. Sure, I will. I am a 30-year-old man, and I work as a cleaner in a school for special needs children. I'm good at what I do, and I take pride in coming in every day to make sure that both the children and the teachers that work there have a clean and safe environment to work in. Some backstory. Before I started working at this location in April 2022, they've had a lot of bad luck with hiring cleaners, as the branch we're in technically falls under specialized cleaning and not general cleaning. In the first 4 months of 2022, they've had 15 cleaners that all disappointed, stopped showing up, or were fired for another reason. This has caused the general custodian of this special needs school, my direct supervisor, to be skeptical of any new cleaner that comes in, which is very fair. Now, I like to give 110% at work. Whether that's smart or not, I'm not sure, but I like to leave my work knowing that I gave it my all. That is why, when I saw the daily and weekly task list and had done an online course on how to effectively clean, I knew that in practice, that would leave a very messy workplace, since not everything would be cleaned correctly. Imagine a desk of a child that has a single eraser on it. According to my online course from the company, that disqualifies that entire desk for cleaning. I won't be allowed to clean it. Furthermore, if chairs are not at the desk, I'm not allowed to sweep or mop under it because it's not the cleaner's job. As such, I've been making some really positive changes to my work schedule, daily, weekly task list, and the way that I do things to not only meet the minimal requirements that my company asks for, but also to go above and beyond, be flexible with the teachers, engage with the students, and leave a beautiful workspace. This went great for a while. Now, the custodian has, for some reason, been getting way more critical of my work. The smallest speck of dust mist or a small drop of coffee spilt somewhere that happened after I was done with the work, and he's blowing up my phone with texts that I need to do things differently. Or he'll tell me first thing when I come in that I need to take my work more seriously. This morning he told me, try and stick to the planning and the correct methods. So I told him that I would. Now, I started to follow the paper list with daily tasks and my methods completely to a T. Every half-assed method that I knew would leave the classrooms and the bathrooms in a horrible state. Trash cans need emptying? Nope, not on my list. One piece of paper on a filthy desk? No longer my problem. Spills in the hallways? Looks like mopping the floor isn't on today's task list. Sorry. The entire place looked horrible. I had to hold myself back to not do more than the list because I hate leaving work unfinished, but I was finally done. I approached the teachers of the classroom that I had to clean today beforehand, explained the situation, and promised them to give their classrooms a proper cleaning the next day because they and the students shouldn't be the victims of my malicious compliance. But they were in on it. They even agreed to give their signature on my task list to sign off that they think I did all of the work correctly. Naturally, the custodian didn't like my work today, and we had a good heart-to-heart for a moment. I told him that I really appreciate that he wants to safeguard the quality of my work. It's what they pay me for after all. But I hope that I've shown him and some teachers that I do go above and beyond daily, and that today's work, that looked like a mess, was my company's standard. I also let him know that the constant badgering was incredibly unmotivating. It was really putting a dampener on my spirits. I told him that I'd be doing my work normally again tomorrow, and he said he appreciated all the work I usually do, and that he tried to be more flexible as well and put more trust in me. All's well that ends well, I suppose. I just want to make sure that these special needs children have a clean school to learn, laugh, and play in after all. And yeah, you know what? It is good that it ended well, because ultimately you clearly are very good at your job, and you have the best intentions, and you're doing good stuff. I don't really get why your boss, your custodian, would get so anal about this sort of stuff. You're doing an amazing job already. Why does it matter if one tiny thing is wrong? It's like they have to realize that you are so good at what you're doing, but yeah, there are always going to be tiny errors from anyone that does any job ever. It's one of those ones where they didn't realize how good you were until you weren't doing as good a job as you normally do. But as you say, the main thing is that the kids are okay and the teachers have a good environment to teach in. And that's exactly what you created. So good stuff. Stop wasting time and follow the job order. Yesterday, I got an email from a customer who wanted an in-depth analysis of dish soap sales for the past 3 years. Easy peasy, it's all automated, but time consuming to extract that much data. As I was entering the details into the software according to the job order, I see customer specified product code A190. I checked the database and uh-oh, that's the code for scented candles. I think they meant A160, dish soap. Due to past shenanigans, we're supposed to follow job orders to the letter, and if there is a conflict, the product code trumps over whatever else the customer wrote. This is spelled out very clearly in our service agreements. However, if I suspect a mistake, I will give the customer a call so they can amend the job order and avoid wasting time and money. They're usually grateful for the heads up. So I call the customer and I barely manage to say that I'm from the company. Then this lady starts berating me about how long the job is taking. First off, I got the timestamped email less than 15 minutes ago, and this kind of report usually has a turnaround of 24 to 48 hours. Secondly, I'm trying to help by pointing out the wrong product code. But this lady just will not let me talk. She keeps cutting me off and talking over me. When I finally managed to get 2 words in and say I wanted to confirm the product code, she tells me to stop wasting her time and just do what the job order says. Then she hangs up on me. You can probably guess how it went. I ran the request as written for product A190, the candles, and I sent it yesterday by EOB. The lady flipped when she saw it. Apparently, they needed this report for a meeting that now has to be rescheduled. My boss and her boss got involved. The end result is that the customer's boss just sent me a request to please run a report for dish soap, A160, when convenient, and apologizing for the misunderstanding. My company will waive the cost of the extra reports. I understand the lady was moved to a role that limits the amount of damage she can do. Already the fact that she ordered the report the literal day before the meeting wasn't great. Moral of the story. Before telling someone to shut up, maybe listen to what they're saying. Yeah, I can't lie, I've definitely been in this spot before where you yourself, as in me, have left something until the last minute and then you expect someone else to help you with it really quickly and you're very impatient, etc., etc. When just because you made a mistake in leaving it so last minute doesn't mean that it's an emergency on their part. That being said, not listening to what you were saying when it's your job to know what is going on is criminal. 5 seconds of shutting your mouth would have saved so much time and ultimately money. You're lucky you got that money back because realistically, you didn't deserve it. I knew my job, but the new manager thought he knew better, so I did it his way, very precisely. So I used to work for one of the top delivery companies in the UK. There was a lot less competition 15 years ago. I was very good at my specific delivery job, and I often undertook every office task from single delivery routes to maintaining the office and delivery distribution to all routes. Then one day, in comes the new manager, and it was the cliche that you dread. You've probably all met the type. Suit slightly too big and a trainee moustache. He'd just finished uni and, to his credit, got himself a business degree. The problem with this company was every office around the whole country was run differently, and this poor manager was expecting every person to do things by the letter. But most of the work was done on goodwill since we were allowed to finish for the day when we completed our deliveries. It was creating a rod for our own backs, to be honest, but it was nice to finish earlier on lighter days. Finally, on his third day after watching me daily and asking me why I was doing things in certain orders, I told him my delivery route was complex and required it to be done in a certain order to ensure the time deliveries got there before 1 PM and the other delivery staff were fed their delivery materials by myself at certain times to ensure optimum delivery speeds and minimum delay. He replied, "No, it doesn't work like that." I simply stared for a bemused few seconds and said, "I don't understand." He wanted it by the letter today as per company guidelines. I argued very hard against it and said he will really regret it because we won't complete, but he insisted I was wrong because it was all timed and measured. So, after an exasperated 15-minute heated discussion, I did as I was told, to the letter. The 5 staff I fed deliveries to weren't happy, but they understood. It was like a domino effect of carnage. At 12:30 PM, we all rang in the office to report the failed time deliveries, which he promptly freaked out about because they were strictly monitored. The subsequent enforced break times and shuffling required also left 15 to 20% of each walk unfinished, which he also now has to complete himself on top of the timed ones. He had to fill out reports for all failed 1 PM deliveries, all walk failures, and then had to call in managers from other offices to finish it all. They all finished around 4 hours late. He was not popular. The next day he came to me and asked me to show him the mechanics of the delivery route in detail because I didn't expect that to happen, if I'm honest. It was close enough to an apology for me. We actually became good friends over time, but he never questioned me when I said nope ever again. This story reminds me of the second story we looked at in today's episode in many ways. Again though, it's great that he learned his lesson, but I don't know, if something's going well in the first place, do you really need to change it up? That being said, he's a young guy looking to make his mark on the company. I kind of get it, I can kind of understand it from his perspective, and he did do well to rectify it within one day. So, you know what? Not the worst, not the best. Like, imagine if he doubled down and said, no, I'm the manager, I know how to run this, and efficiency got even worse. That would be the sign of someone that doesn't learn from their mistakes. Whereas this guy made a mistake, accepted it pretty quickly. Yeah, his apology wasn't great, but at least he acknowledged that he'd done something wrong. You want me to coerce an inspector after someone else did the work? This happened years ago. I just started working as an independent electrician, and one day I received a call from a new customer. He was one of those people that flips homes in lower income neighborhoods. I'll call him Todd, but honestly, I've forgotten what his name is. Todd asked me to meet him at a vacant house he recently bought to give him an estimate for a full rewiring job. He was 30 minutes late, so I was already unimpressed with him. Upon entering the house, which was right after a rainstorm had passed through, we found an inch of water covering the hardwood floors. There was water pouring out of small holes in the columns on the front porch. Everything was soaked. Instead of showing me around, Todd called his business partner and brother and spent the next 20 minutes cussing him for not fixing the roof. I'm standing around and listening to his man-baby rage on full display. The whole time I'm thinking, there's no way I'm going to work for this guy. His fuse was way too short and his anger was out of hand. I gave him a price, which admittedly was the I don't want to do this job price, and I didn't hear back from him until months later. Todd called me later that year. He explained that he'd found an electrician from 3 states away and had paid the electrician with ceramic tiles instead of cash. The problem now, well, he needed an inspection from the city electrical inspector. I agreed to meet the inspector for him, which I would bill him for. I went back to the house about 20 minutes before the inspector showed up and saw numerous issues. When the inspector arrived, we walked through together. Every issue I saw, the inspector also saw. He pointed them out, and every time I agreed with him that the work was not up to code. This inspector kept looking at me with a puzzled expression. After we did a complete walkthrough, I finally explained to the inspector that I didn't do any of the work, and I was hired to get him to pass the inspection. He asked me if I thought he should, and I told him absolutely not. So I got paid for my time, I got paid to repair all the violations, and I formed a strong relationship with that inspector who was always lenient with me on all of my future jobs. Alright, just trying to get my head around this one. So the same person that wanted you to do a job for him in the first place, but then was clearly horrible to work with and you pretty much said no, then re-employed you for another job in which the whole point was that you were going to help him out, but there was no reason for you to do so. I don't understand. But yeah, I guess that shows a lack of logic from some people in the subreddit. I guess it also proves that even if sometimes things do seem a little bit expensive, they might be expensive for a reason. If you get someone unqualified to do something for some weird trade deal, then yeah, you're going to have problems later on down the line because the work's not going to be good enough. Whereas this guy, you pay the premium at first, but then ultimately you get good work that's going to last for years. Ultimately, it's just strange. I don't know why this guy, having treated you so badly, thought, yeah, he's going to help me out next time and get me a pass. Obviously wasn't going to happen, you mug. Boss said no shorts. I work at an office that sells bulk goods to businesses that use them, like retail outlets, etc. Our office doesn't usually have a strict dress code, but we recently got a new boss, Arsehat, who is quite literally the stick up my arse. He's constantly yelling at everyone about basic stuff, like punching in a minute or two late or early, or being a word or two off the script during outbound and inbound calls. Dealing with him in general has made me hate the job more. As it's getting hotter, I've been wearing khaki shorts to work for the past few days, which is something I've always done for the past few years, and nobody has confronted me about it before. So I figured nothing would change this year. But boy, was I wrong. About halfway through my shift, this boss comes to my desk and realizes I'm wearing shorts, and is visibly annoyed. He mutters something under his breath and goes back to his office. An hour later, I was called into his office where he proceeded to berate me about breaking dress code. He was fuming and ended the meeting with, "From now on, you follow dress code to the book or you're fired." Say no more, boss. That night, I went home and read up on the dress code rules. There was in fact a rule against shorts, so I was annoyed, but I kept on. And then I found it. There is no rule preventing males from wearing skirts or kilts. Here is where I devised my plan. I immediately ordered a pink and white striped kilt online, as well as matching knee-high socks and a shirt. There was no rule stated in the dress code against any of this, surprisingly. About a week later, the clothes arrived, and here is what ensued the following workday. I walked in, wearing my new pink business outfit, and immediately the whole office is staring at me. And the boss who came in to cover another boss's shift in the morning was beat red in the face and yelled at me to go into his office. He goes on a 10-minute rant about how I'm a useless employee and that he's going to fire me for not following the dress code to a T. I simply stated, I am in dress code. I urge you to read the employee handbook. He ended up reading the whole thing in front of me, and I could see him getting more and more angry as he realized I didn't break any rules. I asked him, "So, am I free to go back to work?" And he looked at me with a death glare, muttered something under his breath, and waved me off. Now, I tell you what, guys, there is not much more I like in this world than a man in a pink skirt. I've always said that. You can go back and watch my other episodes. I've always said that. In fact, I say it about once per episode. It's something I love. So fair play to OP. You're making my dreams come true. Ooh, ooh. That is so cringe. F it, keep it in. But anyway, I've got to say, this is great malicious compliance because if you're not allowed to wear shorts when it's super hot, remember at school? I remember at school we were told we weren't allowed to wear shorts sometimes when it was like 30 degrees. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's hot, like super hot, uncomfortably hot. Same as in work. Like if you're forced to wear your blazer or something, or you're forced to wear trousers, screw that, man. Who really cares? I don't. But yeah, one last thing I've got to request is, can I see that photo of you in a kilt? Because I want to. I really do. And I think you will do as well. Perhaps not as much as me, but just a little bit. Let's move on. You want a man to help you? No problem. One will clock in soon. This happened 16 years ago. When I was about 20 years old, I was a department manager in a big box hardware store. People said I acted 25, but I didn't even look 18. As a young female, I saw my fair amount of sexual discrimination, but the worst always came from women. This is the story of one such woman. I managed the paint department. I had 3 associates who worked for me. They loved me as a boss because I bought them a department radio, took the shifts they didn't want, I worked Friday close and Saturday mid, so my 2 younger guys could have time to have fun on Friday nights, and the older gentleman took early Saturday mornings so they could sleep off their fun. In trade, I gave the older gentleman his ideal schedule. My team was awesome. One day, I was in the department alone, and a lady came up and asked me where she could find the 5-gallon oil-based primer. I let her know that my location didn't carry the 5-gallon size of that primer. She told me that we did and said that it was shelved right there, while suggesting I was too stupid to remember. Her husband gave me an apologetic look. I let her know that another location had what she was looking for, and that it was in fact in that exact location in that store. She let me know how stupid she thought I was for thinking that she could mix up stores. Then she began yelling, loudly insisting that I get a man out there to help her because she wanted someone competent and not a stupid little girl. Her husband actually tried to step in at that point, but I just smiled and let her know that a male paint associate would be clocking in any minute and that I would be happy to direct him to her as soon as he is on the clock. I smiled and waited for Joe to clock in. Now, Joe was great, and I knew he could handle this or I wouldn't have put him in this situation, but Joe was also new. Yes, he was learning things super quick, but he still relied on the rest of us for help. When I saw Joe walking up, I quickly said that there was a customer who needed help. I let him know that she was upset and asked him to do his best to answer her questions. Joe walked up to the lady. She said, "Finally, a man!" She asked her question, explained where the product should be, and waited. Joe calmly let her know that he had never seen us carry a 5-gallon size of oil-based primer, but he said that he could check with the paint department manager. She was happy and loudly said she'd be happy to get some real help. Joe then walked up to me and started to ask me about 5-gallon oil-based primers. The lady quickly walked up and asked him what he was doing. He turned and said, "This is my manager. She runs this department." The husband laughed out loud, the woman stormed off, and I bought Joe lunch. Wow, a super interesting story right there. The most interesting part for me is when OP says that it's normally the women in the store, the women customers, that are the sexist ones that demand a man's help. Interesting, you wouldn't necessarily have thought that. And yes, I now have said interesting 4 times. Interesting stuff though. Again though, imagine the look on her face. Imagine her internal monologue. Thank God, finally a man to help me. Go and get someone much more senior and let's get this stuff done. Oh wait, it's the woman that I've just pretty much taken the mech out of. Feels bad. Feels bad. What's a shame is that you just know that she's not going to learn from this as well. She'll go into the next door, do the exact same thing, be surprised and embarrassed when it happens. Ultimately, again, yeah, and then just carry on with her life. GG, Karen, GG. Shady boss lied about my position to keep me from policy allowed benefit for years. I found out and it changed everything. A few years ago, I worked at a big retail company and had for many years. Eventually, I went through enough grad school education to get my license to work at a higher level. Much more pay, more job satisfaction, more responsibilities, fancy title, but the job market was rough. I stayed on with my company to work in a floater position, where I'd cover a large area and work at all the stores within that area on a rotating but irregular basis. Eventually, I wanted to get a staff position, where I have a single store assigned. The area was huge, the furthest store being over 100 miles from my home, and that is exactly where I was assigned to train for the new role. It was a rough store. Folks in my position were robbed and assaulted at gunpoint. The neighborhood was very unfriendly. The volume at the store was among the highest in the States. Staff turnover was, as you might expect, extreme. Well, after training, I wasn't really being scheduled to float to other stores, once a month at most. I asked to be scheduled a little more diversely, since most of the stores in my area were much closer to my home and didn't require 4 hours of driving a day. Bossman told me that I was the only floater experienced enough to handle that store. I didn't buy it, but what can you do, right? Well, a colleague told me about the mileage reimbursement policy. Floaters working at a store more than 50 miles from home can file for reimbursements of mileage over that 50 miles each way, even including meals. So, I filed a few of these out and sent them to my boss to sign. He didn't quite refuse, but he never actually signed and filed them. I suspect as soon as I left his office at our district center, he tossed them out. Bossman tells me later that they must be lost in the system. Eventually, the same colleague showed me how to fax those same forms to accounts payable, bypassing the district bossman. So I started doing just that. One day, boss man calls me in a panic. He wants to stop my filing of the forms. I asked to be floated closer to home, but he still won't budge. He needs me at that miserable store. He promises me he'll make me a staff role at that store if I promise to stop faxing those forms. Now, staff roles are a promotion and usually come with better pay and a few other little conveniences. So I agree. Bossman says that there won't be a pay bump right away, but that it will come down the road. That never happened. 2 years later, the situation at the store has become too toxic even for me. I asked to step down from the star position to be a floater again and be allowed to float to other stores. Bossman says that I'm already a floater. I never was in a star position, but that he can't let me work at other stores because it's better for me and the customers if I stay there for familiarity. Floaters do not get scheduled to stores exclusively, so I'm being singled out because they're still desperate to cover that dump of a store. I'm livid, so I start looking. It took me months, but eventually I found an opportunity to make my dream career transition. I put in my formal notice, and that is when the fun started. Remember that whole mileage reimbursement policy? Well, I kept meticulous track of all my shifts, and there is no statute of limitations baked into the policy. So I started filling out those reimbursement forms to retroactively cover every single shift from the past 2 odd years. I skipped the meal part since I didn't want to go through all that effort of finding receipts. I had a friendly store manager sign off on them, and I started sending them to accounts payable directly again. I didn't fax them all in at once, but for each shift in my final 2 weeks, I faxed a few dozen in. We still have fax machines in that line of work, believe it or not. I figured, what do I have to lose? Worst case scenario, accounts payable declines the forms. On my last few shifts, I started getting the checks from accounts payable. Not added to my paycheck, but sent to me directly. Mileage reimbursements are non-taxable income, so this was all tax-free money coming to me. It must have taken a while for the charges to show up on a balance sheet, because a few weeks after my final paycheck, I got a call from my now former boss man. He wasn't happy. He got some big loss prevention manager involved, and together, they started saying I was breaking some rule by requesting the payments. They specifically claimed I was ineligible because I agreed I wouldn't be eligible in a star position. They then threatened legal action against me if I didn't remit the full amounts back that same week. But I had the email chain from when Bossman said I was never staff and always a floater. I politely referenced that email chain before letting them know firmly that because I was lied to, our prior agreement didn't apply, and I was fully eligible all along. Corporate policy, as confirmed by HR, agreed with me, so I let them know I wasn't returning a single penny. In the end, the reimbursements amounted to well over $21,000, and I transitioned into my dream job. I could say that I would trade that money back for the time I lost commuting to that miserable store. Remember, 4 hours every shift, but all that pressure motivated me to make the best career move of my life. The great satisfaction of not only professionally surpassing my old boss, but also getting to tell him that his lies cost him way more on the way out is almost priceless. I also shared my story and method with many colleagues who were also being told wrongly by the boss man that they didn't qualify for this policy. OP, that is actually class, because not only have you made yourself $21,000 tax-free for free, as in you didn't have to work to get that money, you were just given it. Think of the amount of money that you might have also saved or earned other colleagues. It could be anything. It could be hundreds of thousands. In fact, it probably is. If there are other people in this company that weren't getting the benefit that they're, legally allowed to get, and they're then getting it, retrospectively, wow, this boss is in a lot of trouble, that's for sure. I mean, minimum 6 figures, I'd hazard a guess at. Probably, a high 6 figures. Who knows? It's a lot. And it's all because of you. I love it. Again, I feel like I always say it with stories like this, but I don't understand what the logic is from this boss. Are they just thinking that nobody will ever realize this? Nobody's ever gonna know? Just treating employees badly in general? I mean, forget about the money that you're allowed. Like, saying that you're gonna get a pay rise and a promotion, but then saying, oh no, we didn't actually give you that. How is that ever gonna benefit you? You're just gonna make your employees unhappy. They're gonna move because they don't like the work, like OP has done. So you're just losing good employees. Like, how is that a good business model? Hey, let me know down in the comments if you think that's a good idea. Personally, I think it's pretty shambolic. I was forced to eat at fancy restaurants for a month. Many years ago, I got put on a work assignment for months that required me to travel to New York City and stay every Monday to Friday. I was assisting a company manager with a project, and my hotel was near his regular office in the theatre district. If you're not familiar, the theatre district is heavily built for tourists. Restaurants are generally kind of fancy and expensive. There weren't really any quick and cheap options for dining in that area. The company had a generous meal policy of up to $30 to $40 per meal for travel expenses. Now, I did use that for a bit, but the food got to feeling too indulgent and kind of ridiculous given it was an extended assignment. Also, I was working really long hours and I didn't want to go and sit in restaurants. I just wanted to watch TV and sleep in my room. So, after the first week or so, I instead went to a grocery store on Monday night. I bought some basics for cereal, sandwiches and snacks, and some frozen meals I could microwave for lunch in the office. It cost about $60. I then took a few cans of soda from my hotel fridge to make room for my weekly food purchase and returned them before checking out at the end of the week. And that was it for food costs, with an occasional meal out here or there. I did the same the next 4 weeks, submitted my expense report at the end of the month, and you all know where this is going. A lady from accounting called and refused to reimburse my expenses because $60 is more than $40, the max allowance for a meal purchase. I explained that had covered 5 days of food, but was told it didn't matter. So I then spent the next month trying all the food in the neighborhood. There really were not any cheap options. I went out to eat a few mornings, lunch whenever I found the time, and dinner absolutely every day. Now look, I could have bought a few installments of groceries daily, but the once per week shopping convenience was part of why I'd wanted them. It had also seemed wasteful for me to go out for an expensive meal every night for long-term travel, but now I've been told that was preferred by accounting to my grocery bills. The next morning, I got a call from my NYC manager asking how I'd run through more budget every week of the month than the entire month before combined. I explained the grocery situation and he thanked me and hung up. About 10 minutes later, that same lady from accounting called to tell me they'd pay my still not reimbursed grocery bill and any going forward, as long as the daily amount averaged for the week was under the aggregate meal allowance. I happily returned to a more reasonable diet. Yeah, very, very strange. I just don't understand the logic here once again. I never do in these stories, really, do I? But come on, if a guy's willing to go to the grocery store and buy normal price groceries that will last him for a week for $60, and you're saying no. Instead, 40 times 5, what is that, mathematicians? Pay $200 on meals instead. It's just like, why? Oh wait, what's that? You're spending more money because you're going out to fancy restaurants? I could never have predicted that. Stop doing that now. So strange. Really is. I don't get it. I agree with OP though. Yes, he did maliciously comply and I love it, but surely you get to the point like OP did where you're like, well, I don't really want to go out for every single meal and eat really fancy food. I'd rather just lie in bed or just, have a microwave meal at home or something really simple. It's weird. I just don't understand it. Let's move on. My boss demanded I serve all customers and fill all shelves, no matter how far past closing hours it was. So, my first job I ever worked at for a few years was a grocery retail store with several different departments, including a deli for lunch meat and cheese, which is where I worked. One night I was working a shift of 1 to 9 p.m. 9 p.m. is when the deli and other special departments closed, and we're expected to be done and clocked out. But the rest of the store remained open 24/7 for general groceries. It was me and one other guy. We had an especially busy night, and we were a little behind on our cleaning as a result. But we had our meat slicing machines already coated with sanitizer after working for 15 minutes to get all the little meat chunks and shavings out of every corner, as we were pretty serious about making sure those things were clean as can be. It's about 8:55 at this point. We're almost late to leave, and the store we worked for did not like overtime. If you were getting any amount of overtime, you'd get chewed out the next day for it, even for a little amount. A woman walks up to the counter and starts looking through the products, as we had a glass case filled with a bunch of types of our lunch meats, pre-sliced and ready to go for bagging up. She looks at one and says, "I want this turkey right here, but I want it freshly sliced." I, of course, look to my co-worker, and we both can see the 2 slices we have are still covered in the sanitizer we use and are drying. Now, as per the food safety protocol written on the bottle, that says to allow 20 to 30 minutes minimum for the sanitizer to dry after application. So I tell her, "Well, Mom, we really can't do that right now. Our slices are both being cleaned at the moment as the department is closing in 5 minutes, but I'd be glad to get you something here from our cold case. So you're not gonna slice it fresh for me? That's what you're saying?" I replied, "That's correct." I apologize. Without another word, she walks away, and myself and my coworker go back to what we were doing. And we finish cleaning and go home after about 5 more minutes, narrowly clocking out on time. Fast forward 2 days later, me and the same coworker come in and start getting to work like a normal day. At about 3 p.m, 2 hours into the shift, I personally get called into the head honcho's office. The store director, as they're titled. I think nothing of it and head on upstairs and go inside the office and sit down. The store director hands me a piece of paper and says, "Tell me what caused this." I look at the paper and it's a printed out screenshot of a Google review for our store. 1 out of 5 stars. And a full paragraph from that lady of 2 nights before complaining that she didn't get her freshly sliced meat from the rude employee, and then describing me specifically. I explained exactly what happened 2 nights prior, as clearly as I'm typing it out right now. The director is getting heated and begins to cut me off while I'm speaking, asking, "Why would slices be covered in sanitizer at 8:55? You're scheduled to work until 9. I said, yes, I am, but seeing as I'm constantly being reminded not to get any overtime, I usually start cleaning them at around 8:30. The director gets even more upset and raises her voice. "I don't care. That's not how it works. If you have a customer, you serve them. And you better start making sure those shelves are filled before you leave, or you won't be working here anymore. Now get out." I'm pretty salty at this point. I go back down to the department and my coworker asks what happened, and I told him. He says, "So they want everything done before we leave?" I said, "Yep." And without another word, he knew what we needed to do. 9 p.m. hits as usual, and our shelves are at the usual standard of half full. But seeing as we've been given a new standard, we decided to stay and make sure we did what I was instructed to do. We spent the next several hours past closing time, slicing and slicing and slicing until every single tray of meats and cheese was full. We had plastic totes in the big fridge full of cheese that we sliced that were wrapped up in half-pound blocks for ease of sale. So we decided to fill that tub over the brim with every single type of cheese we had available. We cut up around 70 pounds of cheese and wrapped it up in the fridge. We also had a Subway-style sandwich counter where we made sandwiches to order and also pre-made on the shelves for sale. We made double the usual amount of sandwiches and filled the shelves, as per requested. Not a single shelf had a single empty spot on it by the time we were done. After every single possible item and shelf was as full as it could be, we finally started to clean and close. It was around 3 a.m. when we finally left. The department opens at 5 a.m. We were exhausted, but our spiteful overtime venture made us feel pretty good. We got about 6 hours overtime in. They hated anyone getting even 5 to 10 minutes of overtime. We both came in the next day at 1 p.m. as usual, expecting complete retaliation. But nope. Instead, our department manager of the deli kinda saunters over to us and says, hey, you should be good to start cleaning up at 8:30 like usual. I think the director got the point you made. Normally, overtime would be asked to be taken care of by clocking out for lunches or coming in later than usual. But they let us keep all 6 hours of that overtime. They never said anything to us about overtime again after that. I accepted a job that paid almost double about 6 months after this incident and never ever went back to retail hell. I tell you what, if you're willing to work until 3 a.m. when your shift normally ends at 9 just for a little bit of vengeance and to do exactly what your boss has told you, wow, you must really want to show them that they're wrong. And hey, you did, so I rate it very highly. This is the thing with Google reviews, and you know the saying, the customer is always right. Well, no, that's just not true. Yes, obviously customer service is very important when you're working in this sort of industry, but there has to be a limit, right? You can't just make things for customers when the shop's about to close or when your counter's about to close. You're gonna get bad reviews, and you have to just take that. I think the play is just the manager to comment on the review and say, you came 5 minutes before we were closing. We therefore cannot serve you. We're not going to make new stuff just for you. And then potential customers, when they see those bad reviews, can at least look at what the manager has replied and they'll get some sort of context. But you can't then just say to your workers, no, stay open forever. Prepare all of tomorrow's food right now. Work till 3 a.m, but also don't do overtime. It's just weird once again. Let's carry on with the stories. Chick tries to gatekeep my nationality. Time to ascend to a form further beyond. I am a 20-something British American male living in a very southern and undereducated part of the US. I've been here for a while now, and generally, when I tell people where I'm from, I get a little pushback, because I don't really have as thick of an accent anymore. On to the story. I work in a small office. We have a rolling line of temps that come and go. Most of them are barely high school graduates, or people with very little in the way of worldly experience. This is important for later. So, one day, they bring the usual parade of new hires around, and I do my introduction. Hi, I am OP. I am one of the recruiters here at the company. I'm married with 2 dogs, and I'm originally from the UK. Normally, this is just a throwaway line that I use as an icebreaker, and it normally rolls right off, until this wonderful young woman pipes up. You don't sound British. She, of course, left out the T very purposefully. Sorry, love, forgot the coat and tails at home, I say, as I drink my Twinings. If you're British, you love that sentence. The group kind of laughed it off, and I figured it was a pretty open and shut deal. Nope. A couple of days later, word gets around that this chick has been telling a bunch of people that I'm not British and that I'm lying for clout. She said that I don't even sound British and that she is dating a British guy and knows how they act. So, rather than be a mature adult, I do the very British thing of malicious compliance. I need an intern to bring me some tea. Would you mind climbing the apple and pears and pouring me a cup of Rosie Lee? I started wearing 3-piece suits, a pocket watch, and a monocle I found at a thrift shop. I went Super Saiyan 3 British. Obviously, about 3 hours into the first day, my boss wants to know what's up. I tell her, and she finds it so hilarious that she assigns that intern to me for the rest of the day. I kept using odd British rhyming phrases and sayings, and she'd have to keep asking me to speak normal. I would reply, but I thought you know how us British people act. She quickly realized her error, and we've been cordial ever since. Nowadays, I keep my old red passport in my desk drawer, just in case someone pulls that stunt again. Hey, I tell you what, there's not much worse that you can say to a British person than you don't seem British or you're not British, because that hurts right in the heart. Don't say it, man. Come on. I love where this guy went with it, though. I mean, like, the things that he was doing, no British person does. I mean, I've never met anyone that wears a monocle or speaks the way he was speaking. It's just good how he really embraced it and was like, you know what? If you say I'm not British, I'm going to show you just how British I am. Even jumping back 100 years to when people spoke like this. Lovely stuff. I enjoyed it. It is a little bit weird, to be fair, that out of nowhere, this woman was like, oh, you don't sound British. Are you lying? Like, why would anyone lie about being English? It's a weird thing to lie about, that's for sure. Imagine if I was like suddenly, yeah, by the way, I'm Italian. What am I gaining from saying that? Nothing. It's strange, but hey, OP, well done. I'm glad your boss enjoyed it, by the way. That's funny, and everyone can laugh at it now. And the fact that you now get on well with this woman is a good thing. Yeah, just a bit of a joke. I love it. Very good stuff. Don't want to sit inside, even though a storm is coming. Okay, this happened to me a few years ago, and I just remembered it recently. I was working at a restaurant, waiting tables, in a very affluent area on the Jersey Shore. We had our fair share of entitled people who were under the impression that if you throw enough money around, you can do whatever you want and treat people however you want. And when your income depends on their tips, you kind of just have to deal with it. The restaurant had an outdoor dining and bar area that overlooked the ocean with an amazing view. During the summer, this was pretty much where everyone wanted to sit rather than our indoor dining area. And for anyone who works someplace with outdoor dining, you know the one monkey wrench that can ruin a very profitable dinner shift. The weather. No matter how accurate the forecast says it's going to be, you can never know for sure. For the most part, we never had an issue, because if it started to abruptly rain, there would usually be more than enough room inside for all the people who were sitting outside to move in. It's usually a clusterfrick to keep track of which table moved where, but we always handled it without any issue. Until this one day. We had a large party booked one day in our indoor area that took up more than half our tables. A 50th birthday, I believe. So our indoor capacity was limited. And even on top of the party, there were customers who were wary about the weather, so decided to sit inside also. More and more people came, and therefore more and more people started sitting outside. My manager did a quick assessment and realized that if it started raining, we would barely have enough room inside to accommodate everyone sitting outside. He told us we had to stop seating our outdoor area and to start recommending to our outdoor tables to move inside because of the impending weather, to be on the safe side. Everyone's weather app was saying there was a downpour coming up the coast. Everybody was okay with it. Except, I had a table of 9 people who seemed fairly middle-aged and very wealthy. Margaritas with top shelf tequila, gaudy looking jewelry, etc, etc. Each end of the table seemed to be in their own conversation, not paying attention to the other. Upon hearing about the incoming rain, I go to the woman whom I thought was in charge. She had the fakest tan of them all, and I tell her, let's call her Karen, "Mom, I'm really sorry, but because of the weather coming in and our limited seating inside, I'm going to have to move you folks inside so you don't get caught in the rain." This Karen is so entrenched in her conversation, she doesn't even register that I, a lowly waiter, was talking to her. So I try again. "Mom, I'm sorry for interrupting," but she cuts me off exasperated. What are you saying?" I begin again. "Mom, I'm sorry. Because of the weather coming and our inside filling up, we need to move you guys inside. We've got a table ready for you. I can move all your drinks and everything for you." She snaps back with, "The only reason we came here was to sit outside. We'll deal with the weather." I realize she just isn't grasping what I'm saying, so I try once more. "Mom, just in case," and then she goes from 0 to 100 and yells, "We'll frickin' deal with it." She yelled so loudly that the people on the other half of her table heard. They didn't hear our prior exchange, but only heard her outburst and went back to their conversation. I assume this must be normal behavior for her. Alright then, she wants to deal with it on her own? You got it. So, I began to take their order. Filet mignons, a few lobster tails, expensive stuff. I put the order in, and I look back and all the other tables had moved inside, because they were all rational human beings. And my table of 9 entitled jerks were the only ones out there. I heard the leathery looking Karen say to the rest of the table, "Wow, we have the entire patio to ourselves. What luxury." After a while, I looked inside and saw that the table I had held for them was taken by another party that had just walked in, the last available table. And just as the last bar hit the seats, I felt the best feeling I possibly could have felt at that moment. A glorious raindrop tapped on the top of my head. Oh, sweet glory. Within seconds, it went from beautiful blue skies to torrential downpour. Everyone at the table grabbed their drinks, a little watered down at this point, and ran inside. After they shook themselves dry, they looked around and realized there was nowhere for them to sit. Most of them looked dumbfounded, like a lost child in a supermarket. Karen makes a beeline to me and screams, "We need a table!" I reply, "I'm sorry, Mom, we're fully seated and on a wait for our indoor seating. Maybe one table on the waiting list, but a list is a list." "Well, what are we supposed to do now?" she hawked back at me, which led to me so eloquently saying, "Mom, as you said you would, you frickin' deal with it." I air quoted the frickin' deal with it to really emphasize that that was her response. And as I said that, everyone else at the table realized that was our interaction earlier, and Karen had dug their graves. I felt bad for most of them, because if they'd all known the circumstances, they probably would have convinced Karen to move in. But after she raised her voice and cursed at me, all bets were off. And as serendipity would have it, at that moment their food came out and we handed it to them. There they were, 9 people in damp clothes holding a Cosmo in one hand and filet mignon in another, with nowhere to sit and eat. The rest of her party convinced her just to get some boxes for their food and pay their check and leave. As I hand Karen the check, she smugly says, "Well, this will be reflected in your tip." To which I replied, "Mom, we implement a 20% tip on parties of 8 or more. It's our policy, and it's clearly stated in our menu." She paid and then left with their boxed up food, leaving behind their half-full drinks. Best $60 I ever made. Yeah, you know what? This Karen deserved everything that happened to her. It's just brilliant as well, like the icing on the cake, saying that she's not going to charge a tip without realizing that a tip is forced and included. It's so good. OP, well done, right? You said come inside, you tried your best, they didn't. What more can you do? It's up to them at that point. They refused and, you know, they had to deal with the consequences. Brilliant. Really, really good. What makes this story so good as well is that I can imagine the bill was really expensive. Like, you know, filet mignon, really nice top-end cocktails, and they're having to take all that home in to-go bags and boxes. Like, oh my god, what a difference it has been. Sitting outside at a lovely restaurant, enjoying a very expensive, good meal, and then having to take it all home. like McDonald's or something like that. Brilliant. Well deserved. Now moving on to our second story of malicious compliance. Sorry, I deleted all the files you told me to delete. My job was to design and write software prototypes for individual high-value customers. If they liked it enough, then a real software engineering team would build the real products. Occasionally, I would run the prototype for a few months while the customer evaluated if they wanted to buy the real projects. Now, these prototypes are not a lot of code, but they do run with a lot of data. Even compressed, it can be a terabyte or more. Having done this work for years, I've accumulated a small disk farm of past projects, which can be very useful when a customer asks for something, just like we did last year, but with a small change or two. The company resisted buying hard drives for this, but it saves me so much time. I ended up buying 1 or 2 a year myself until I accumulated about 10 of them. Figure over $1,000 worth of external drives. Then, unexpectedly, management changes. New management thinks they can replace old software guy with a cheaper new software grad, and I'm laid off, with 2 weeks to train my replacements. Yes, it is blatant age discrimination, but impossible to fight. So I just went for a graceful transition to my next job. Except I have $1,000 of personal disk drives with old customer data on them. The company insists that no ex-employees may take any company data off premises and all files must be deleted. I don't want to just leave the drives at the company, but they insist I must delete all data before taking them home. So I offer 1, they can buy them from me. 2, I will eventually use them for something else, but I can leave the data on them in case someone needs it. Not good enough. The new manager insists I must delete all data and all backups before I remove the drives. Okay, that's what I do. 6 months later, I get a series of desperate phone calls. New software grad has been unable to build any new prototypes. Old customers are calling to get old prototypes updated, and the new software grad has no idea how to do that. The executive VP is calling to ask what it would take to bring me back to do my old job. Sorry, I've got a new job now. And even if I didn't, I can't just modify the old prototype because you insisted I delete all old copies of it. If I did want to modify it, I'd first have to recreate it from scratch. The code still exists in their source control, but the data is the heart of the prototypes, and that old series of 6 months apart data we collected is gone for good, no matter what. Sorry, you screwed yourselves exactly like I told you would. I hope whatever you saved by hiring a new grad to replace an actual experienced programmer was worth it. Yeah, I'll just never understand the need to replace somebody who's really good at their job with someone younger, just for the sake of it, or just to save a little bit of money. It's so risky, right? I mean, look, even if this dude hadn't kept all the files, say they've been kept instead on the company software or on, company hard drives, and the new guy had access to them, it's still clear he didn't know what he was doing, and they would have had to go back for OP anyway. What if he just said no? They would have been screwed. Obviously, that's compounded by the fact that OP was the one who had the files in the first place and since has deleted them. But forget that, it doesn't actually really matter that much. They would have been screwed anyway, and they would have needed OP anyway. It's just weird to me, getting rid of someone who's very good at their job for somebody that isn't going to be as good. Or like there's a slim chance that they will be as good just because they're younger. Sure, eventually when OP retires, get a new person in. But until that point, why? Makes no sense. And I'm a young person. I should be standing up for this guy. Still makes no sense to me. And now moving on to our final malicious compliance story of this episode. When someone asks you to write your name so they can report you to corporates, do this. I used to work for a car rental company. I won't say which, but the name accurately describes the employee's daily experience working for them. Okay guys, if you can work this out, what the company name is, write it in the comments below. I'm going to reveal it at the end of the story, but it's quite clever. During my time, the company continuously changed policies regarding debit cards for rentals because of the large amount of fraudulent transactions associated with them. This caused much drama with customers, in particular with return customers, who hadn't been in since the policy change. Around the end of each school year, many people rent minivans or SUVs to pick up their kid and a bunch of their stuff from college. I had one such customer who didn't qualify for the rental vehicle she reserved. Per my training, I was not allowed to rent anything larger to her than a sedan because she didn't have a credit card. When I informed her that I could only give her a Hyundai Elantra, she became enraged. She stated that the previous year she was able to rent a minivan under a debit card, and I informed her that policy had changed since then. She refused to acknowledge that I was doing my job properly. I repeated company policy multiple times and did my best to inform her that I was doing the best I could with the current situation. She refused any attempt I made to placate her. My manager eventually stepped in, and he broke down and did the rental for an SUV against company policy. The entitled woman smirked at me and pushed a stack of post-it notes that was on the counter in front of me. She said, "You should not be in customer service, and I'm going to report you to corporate. I want you to write your name on this paper." Without missing a beat, I took the pad and wrote the words "your" and "name" on the top sheet, ripped it off, and handed it to her. Apparently, she didn't notice until she was in the parking lot with my manager and her husband to inspect the vehicle. When my manager came back into the office, he said, "Her husband, who stood silently behind his raging wife throughout the whole interaction, wants me to write you up because you didn't give them your real name." Then he started laughing and said, "But I'm not going to do anything because you followed the company policy and you did exactly what that dog asked you to do." She gave us a horrible survey and it tanked our bonus for that quarter, but it was totally worth it to put that rude woman in her place. Alright, so first of all, I'm pretty sure that the name of this rental car company is Hertz, Hertz, because I guess it hurts their employees. Well done if you got it. Nice little pun from OP. In terms of the actual story, pretty petty from you, but I kind of love it. She did ask you for your name and you wrote your name. You can't argue with that. You just can't. I'm not entirely sure if your manager should have let her get away with this, but then again, it does sound like a relatively new policy and she obviously didn't know. Her reaction was way too strong though. Like, come on. There's no need to start abusing you and saying you shouldn't be in customer service, I'm going to report you, etc, etc. But yeah, overall, some pretty good malicious compliance, and I'm glad that your manager did understand where you're coming from at the end and didn't punish you. You say your kids are 13? Okay. So this happened about 10 years ago when I worked at the box office of a movie theater, before automated machines were the norm. Adult tickets, that's 14 years plus, were $11.99. Kids, that's 3 to 13, were $9.50, and kids under 3 were free. I had a woman come to my till with 2 kids. Now, these kids look to be about 15, though it can be hard to tell sometimes. As many kids don't carry any kind of ID, the rule of thumb was to sell either a kid's ticket or an adult ticket based on how old the adult told us the kids were. Many people would abuse this and say the kids were 13 in order to save a few bucks. Typically, I didn't care, as I understood the prices were pretty high and this was a big chain, so a few older kids getting cheaper tickets wasn't a big deal. Now, what was different this time is that this woman was very rude throughout the whole transaction. We have a series of questions we have to ask throughout the transaction, loyalty program, etc., and we'd randomly get scored by mystery shoppers to ensure that we were following the script. This woman was annoyed and short with me throughout the whole transaction, when I was just being super friendly and trying to do my job. When we got to the part about what kind of ticket she needed, it went something like this. I said, "How old are the kids?" "Why?" she asked. "Oh, just so I know whether they need kids tickets or adult tickets." "What's the difference?" "Adult tickets are for ages 14 and up and are $11.99, and kids tickets are for 3 to 13 and are $9.50. "Oh, they're 13. Okay, and which film would you like to go and see today?" She said the name of the film. I can't remember which one it was anymore. "Okay, no problem. For 2 kids and 1 adult, that will be $30.99 total." "Actually, I'm not going with them. I'm just dropping them off." "Well, unfortunately, this movie is 14A, which means you have to be either 14 or accompanied by an adult to see it." "Well, they're 14. "You just told me they're 13. "Well, they're actually 14. I just didn't want to pay the price for adult tickets." "Unfortunately, you told me they're 13. Unless you have ID that shows they are 14, I have to assume what you first told me was correct, and I can't allow them to watch this movie unsupervised as it's a 14A. "This is ridiculous. So what are my options?" "They can either go to a different movie that's not 14A, or you'll have to buy them a ticket and accompany them to this one." After a lot of back and forth about options, she finally decided to bite the bullet and buy an adult ticket to accompany them. I like to think she spent the next 2 hours reflecting on how her attempt to save $5 ended up costing her $11.99 and 2 hours of her time. Realistically, she likely bought the ticket, accompanied them into the theatre, and then left them there to watch the movie while she went shopping. But either way, it still cost her the extra $11.99 for her tickets. Wow, there you go. I actually love this story. It's just so good. What is the point of going against company policy? You know, straight up lying. Yeah, sure, it may not be illegal, but look, it's not great. For the sake of $5, what's the point? Come on. And look, I do agree with OP. It's almost definite that she walked out and did some shopping after just a few minutes, but that isn't the point. It's the principle of it all. First of all, she's had to go through all that faff to actually go with them at the same time, wasting a little bit of her time. That's brilliant. But yeah, the main thing that she can't get away from is the fact that after trying to save $5 cheekily against the rules of the cinema, she's actually had to end up paying $12 instead. Now that is just brilliant. It is great that employees like OP are told to take adults' words for it in terms of kids' ages, yet still, she's been mugged off. It's so good. I love it. Now moving on to our second story of malicious compliance. Don't bother you with quality control emails anymore? Have fun refunding a $10K order. I work for an embroidery company that embroiders logos onto uniform shirts. There's this one particular shirt we get all the time that has a diagonal closure. So the left side of the chest is essentially covered by a huge flap coming from the right side. There is such little room on the left side that any logo bigger than an inch looks like it's going into the person's armpits. After a few complaints, we made it policy to only allow that shirt to put logos on the right. A big company we work with likes to make massive orders with generalized embroidery placements. For example, 10 different types of garments, all embroidered with a logo on the left chest. Whenever I would see that this particular shirt was in the mix, I would reach out to them to let them know we needed to switch the logo to the right side. One difficult manager from that company reached out to their client with my suggestion and got an earful because the client insisted that their logo could only be placed on the left due to company policy. Instead of smoothing it over with her clients, this rep took it out on me. She sent me a very aggressive email stating that we were perfectly capable of embroidering the shirt on the left side because we'd done it in the past, and to stop blowing up her inbox with our suggestions for a better embroidery location. From now on, whatever embroidery location the order requests is final. So I saved the email and got my boss's blessing to immediately stop all quality control emails for this company. Per manager. One day, a huge order comes in. All diagonal closure shirts, all left side embroidery. I maliciously complied and sent the order on its way with no hassle to that manager. A week later, an executive from that company emails me horrified. He forwarded photos of the client's shirts, all with the logos in the armpits. He said that they were having to refund the client over $10K and that the client was in uproar, never wanting to order shirts from them again. Why did we not tell them that this was a bad location for the embroidery? I didn't say a word. I simply forwarded the email the manager sent me, telling me verbatim that I was to no longer waste the company's time making useless suggestions for those shirts. Okay guys, now what you can see on screen right now isn't the actual shirt because OP can't post it for privacy reasons, but it is sort of similar to how it would be. So as you can see, if you wanted a logo on the right side of this jacket, or whatever it is, blouse, it just wouldn't fit. There's no space for it. And yeah, you can kind of understand how it would end up looking as if it was going into the armpit. Makes sense to me. Yeah, now this one, I'm sorry, but this company, and more specifically this manager, got exactly what they asked for. They got what they deserved. If you're not willing to listen to quality control from the company that is supplying you the item that you've ordered, then what's the point? Like, why even go there in the first place? You went to that company at first for some good products, right? They're telling you there's going to be an issue. Why wouldn't you listen? I get it, it's not perfect, it's not what the client wants, but either modify the order, as they said, put the logo on the other side, or just do another shirt. If you're going to do this and just not listen, then what's the point? It makes no sense to me. You deserved it. Sorry. OP, I also really like that you didn't bother really that much saying, no, we have to do this, we have to do this. After a while, just like, you know what? They're not listening to me. Why am I going to keep going on about this and trying to get them to come round to this idea when they're not going to change their minds? And the manager has literally said to me, stop emailing me about this. Screw it. Let's go for it. See how they like it. Love it. Now moving on to our next story of malicious compliance. Everyone else wants the meeting first thing in the morning? Okay. So, this story is being stolen from my girlfriend. She works at a company that provides warehousing, product prep, and direct-to-consumer services to other companies. She works in the office dealing directly with several key accounts, but also has a few lines that she manages. The lines are responsible for prepping and building shipments. The line workers will gather in the morning and wait for their daily assignments, as well as any direct-to-consumer orders from my girlfriend. This detail is important. The other office workers help manage some of the accounts, but they do not manage the lines or direct-to-consumer orders, nor do they know how to. So, she comes into work one day and finds out they have a new director, and he wants to start organizing, streamlining, etc. You know, the things the new important person does to make it look like he's giving it his all. His first order of business is to have a mandatory daily meeting at 8 a.m. with everyone in the office that will take no longer than 15 minutes. My girlfriend requests that the meeting starts at 9 a.m. instead, as the warehouse workers will be doing nothing but waiting around for their assignments otherwise. The director, probably not wanting to look like he's playing favorites on his first day, puts this to a vote. And surprise, the other people want to start first thing in the morning, as they have nothing else to do at that time. So my girlfriend says, alright, if they want to start first thing in the morning, that's no problem. The next day, the meeting begins as soon as everyone arrives. And as they gather and the director begins talking, they hear the various lines start calling my girlfriend's name over the radio in the distance. 5 minutes go by, and now people begin wandering into the office. 10 minutes, and a small group forms. 15 minutes, and people are coming and going, patiently waiting for her, as she is ferociously tapping her pen on a clipboard. At this point, the director pipes up with a less than sincere, "Well, you look rather anxious, so if you have someplace to be, you can go if we're keeping you." She responds with a candid and rushed, "Thank you so much," and runs away to take care of her lines and process consumer orders. The new director, after this conversation, spoke with the owner of the company. To his credit, the director later that day sought out my girlfriend and recapped what she missed at this meeting, which ultimately ran for over 45 minutes. He also explained that the owner of the company informed him that she has the most responsibility of anyone in the office, generally can be relied on for anything, and is hands down his best employee. The meeting is now at 9 a.m. You know what, guys, correct me if I'm wrong here, but in my opinion, I don't even know if this is malicious compliance. It sounds almost like this director didn't realize the importance of your girlfriend's role, and it sounds like maybe she might even be undervalued by the company itself. I also don't really blame the director. He sounds like a good enough guy. He explained what she'd missed, and also it didn't sound as if he knew what her role really was or how important it was, or the fact that other people were going to be waiting on her. I don't know. Sounds weird. I don't really know if this was malicious compliance at all, or just the lack of understanding and communication before this meeting even took place. Let me know what you guys thought down below. We didn't break any laws. Sure, go to the authorities. This story took place back in the mid-90s. My wife and I were newly married, and our daughter was still an infant. My wife worked in healthcare as a home care nurse, traveling from house to house, looking after people. However, after our daughter was born, she didn't want a job that put her on the road so much, with shifts in the evening. So she applied to be a cleaner at the military base near our community. Two things about our situation that are noteworthy. One is that my wife is a visible minority, and second, as a healthcare worker, she logs everything as a force of habits. The company that hired her was a national company. The base office usually had 5 employees. One had recently quit because her husband was moving with his military job to another part of the country, so the local boss hired my wife to replace her. The 4 other workers were tight. Louise was the boss, who hired her best friend Donna, Donna's brother Dan, and Louise's niece, Tracy. My wife was a true outsider. She immediately saw that things were not quite equal. Even though my wife was paid from 4 p.m. to midnight, she was home by 8 p.m. every night. She was also excluded from cleaning the buildings that housed the engineering and tenancy offices. Occasionally, when she would clean those offices, she saw her colleagues rifling through desks and filing cabinets, photocopying documents, and other shady stuff. My wife also saw Louise threaten a soldier with extra duties for not opening doors fast enough. Louise's husband was a senior NCO in the unit. But jobs were hard to find at the time, so my wife was willing to accept a little discomfort to her ethics. However, after a few months, the racial epithet started. It started with a nickname, then morphed into slurs, and then rumors about her. They started telling racial jokes without trying to hide it. When my wife complained to the four of them that she was uncomfortable, she got called weak, and they threatened her employment. My wife then told them that she would go to the head office. So, she called the head office from work. Stuart from HR dressed down my wife over woman's talk and told her that she needed to thicken her skin and not be too sensitive. My wife countered that she would go to the authorities. Stuart said, "No laws have been broken, so you should go to the authorities. Good luck." Later that shift, she was fired for attitude. So my wife went to the authorities, just not the police. She went to the Human Rights Commission and to the military base headquarters. She gave both photocopies of her logs. The human rights investigation determined that there was a work environment that tolerated racist behaviours. That garnered an apology and an acknowledgement from Stuart, with a smug comment that they will henceforth include a clause about racial sensitivity in their employee paperwork. He even made a comment to my wife that essentially this was nothing. However, behind the scenes, the base had been doing their own investigation. Some of the people whose desks had been rifled in the tenancy buildings have reported that they suspected they'd been snooped through. The dates of some of their reports matched my wife's logs on the date she was there. Louise threatening a soldier was followed up, and it was discovered that Louise's husband had chastised the soldier and arranged for him to do 2 weeks extra duties, a violation of an abuse of authority statutes. The contract with the base required 40 hours of service per week. The base pulled the security and key logs, showing that work was always done by 8 p.m. The base was paying for 40 hours per day and getting 20 hours service. There was a clause in the cleaning contract that stated that federal government human rights regulations needed to be followed. The results of the Commission's investigation determines that they were in violation. Other bases were contacted to see what was going on with this company, and they found out others were having similar issues. As a result, the base broke the contract with cause. It was a 5-year contract broken after the 2nd year. Louise, Donna, Dan, and Tracy were suddenly out of work. The next cleaning company came in. All personnel had to undergo vetting for security. All cleaning was done during the day, preventing people from rifling desks. 40 hours was 40 hours, and cleaners were not authorized to engage soldiers beyond casual "how are you" conversations. My wife went back to healthcare. However, every once in a while, she wonders what Stuart thinks of woman's talk now. I'm actually a little bit confused as to what's just gone on in this story. Like, what were these people photocopying? What were they doing in the desks? Who are they working for, really? There's like so much more to the story that we're not ever going to know, really. I presume for privacy reasons, obviously, and, you know, being secret and OP not wanting to actually disclose who they really are. It's so interesting, like, what could have been going on here? Why were they doing the things they were doing? Why weren't they just cleaning? Look, guys, if you've got any suggestions as to what might have been going on here and who these people really were working for or what their intentions really were, please do comment down below. A very interesting one. I don't really know. Like, sorry, the more I think about it, the more weird it is. They're photocopying stuff in a military base. That's like espionage sort of stuff, isn't it? That is so weird. I actually have got to know what's going on. Guys, comment your theories down below. Super interesting story once again. And again, OP, of course, you did the right thing.